Hey guys, welcome back to Sleepy History Hub. Before we drift off tonight, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It's always comforting to know who's awake with me while the world sleeps. Tonight, let's wander together through the misty streets of Edo, the old Tokyo, far back in the quiet hush of the samurai era. Close your eyes, feel the paper lanterns swaying in the night breeze, and let the footsteps of a lone samurai guard guide you deeper and deeper into dreams. In the heart of Edo, the sky is a muted indigo blanket stretched across the old wooden houses. The moon peeks shyly through drifting mist, turning every rooftop tile silver. A single samurai stands at the wooden gates of his clan's small district. His name, lost to history, is known tonight only by the whisper of his sandals on the stone path. His armor is lighter than a warrior's battle set, just enough to show his clan's crest on the shoulder. Beneath his helmet, a few strands of hair stick to his freckled cheeks, damp with the hush of late spring drizzle. He shifts the grip on the bamboo-handled lantern he carries. The paper sides glow warm amber, casting a gentle circle of light around his feet. Each footstep makes a soft thump on the wooden planks of the narrow bridge leading out of the courtyard. In the distance, faint temple bells mark the hour, a deep, resonant tone that drifts between the houses like a sleepy chant. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then silence swallows it whole. The samurai inhales the smell of wet earth and sakura petals, scattered by a breeze that's grown colder since sunset. The patrol begins. He moves slowly, not because he fears an enemy tonight. The only enemy is the darkness that creeps through the alleys, the secrets that shadows keep. His eyes flick between dark corners. An old tea house, its bamboo shades drawn tight. A row of shops with tatami mats rolled up for the night. A lone drunk, asleep under a paper umbrella, snoring into the gutter. He passes an old wooden gate. The sign above is faded, painted characters barely visible. He stops, listens. Only the drip, drip, drip of water from a rainspout. He lifts the lantern higher. The glow flickers across his face, highlighting the light scatter of freckles on his nose and cheeks. He blinks slow, the warmth of the lantern cutting through the misty chill. The samurai hears footsteps, but only his own. The neighborhood sleeps, bundled under thin rice straw blankets behind paper walls. He imagines the quiet breath of families, dreaming of next spring's cherry blossoms, of debts paid, of rice harvests plenty enough to feed every belly. He shifts the katana at his side, adjusting its weight. The scabbard slides lightly against his palm, a sound as soft as the hush between two breaths. He knows every corner of this ward, the cracked stones, the tiny shrines tucked into alleys, the creaky door where an old woman leaves rice cakes for passing stray cats. The lantern sways again. Shadows dance on whitewashed walls. The drizzle picks up, pattering on the tiled roofs like distant drumming. He pulls his cloak tighter around his shoulders. Tonight, he will make the rounds twice, maybe 3 times, if the mist stays this thick. It is not the fear of thieves that keeps him awake, but the code that binds him, to protect his clan's peace, even when no one stirs to see him do it. He pauses under an ancient cherry tree, its blossoms already fallen. He places the lantern on the stone base of a tiny roadside statue, a Jizo, guardian of travelers. With both hands free, he presses his palms together in a soft bow. The statue, eroded by centuries of rain, wears a simple red cloth bib, offering comfort to the souls of children and wanderers alike. The samurai breathes out slowly, watching his breath fog in the lantern's glow. He feels his heartbeat slow. Step by step, the hush of Edo's sleeping streets seeps into his bones. He lifts the lantern again. The night awaits. The hush continues. The samurai moves on, each step melting into the drizzle that clings to his wooden sandals. The lantern swings gently from his hand, a small sun trapped behind thin paper. Its warm glow pushes the mist back just enough to show the edges of old wooden doors, bamboo fences, and smooth stones polished by centuries of footsteps. Up ahead, the path curves toward an ancient temple tucked between the houses. A single bell hangs under the heavy tiled eaves, its surface green with age. He stops for a moment to listen. Gong. The temple bell chimes once, long and low, carrying over the rooftops like a breath across still water. Somewhere beyond the walls, a monk in brown robes finishes his midnight prayers and returns to his mat on the cold temple floor. The samurai lowers his eyes in respect. Even the bravest blade bows before the hush of the Buddha. The cherry trees in the temple courtyard are bare now. Only a few petals cling to wet stone. Raindrops gather on the eaves, falling in slow beads onto mossy lanterns below. The samurai stands perfectly still, savoring the soft hush that follows the bell. He can feel his own heartbeat, slow and calm, matching the rhythm of the drizzle on his shoulder plates. Suddenly, from behind a half-open wooden gate, comes a whisper of movement. He tightens his grip on the lantern, other hand brushing the hilt of his katana. But then, through the slant of warm light, he sees a pair of shining eyes. A small stray cat, its fur mottled with raindrops, steps out onto the cobblestone path. It blinks at him, tilts its head, and mews, a sound as delicate as the temple's hush. The samurai kneels, resting the lantern on the stones. The cat sniffs at the soft glow, then rubs its wet fur against the edge of his sleeve. He feels its warmth, a flicker of life in this sea of silence. He smiles. Freckles on his cheeks crease as he does, a rare crack in the stoic mask he wears for the world. Carefully, he reaches into a small pouch at his side and pulls out a bit of dried fish left over from the evening meal. He sets it on a dry patch of stone. The cat devours it quickly, tail flicking. Its eyes, green as young bamboo, meet his one more time. A silent thank you. Then it slips away through the gap in the temple wall, a ghost among the shadows. The samurai lifts his lantern, watching the cat's shape disappear. He imagines it curled up somewhere dry, maybe behind an altar, maybe under an old straw mat. He hopes it dreams of warmth and full bellies, even if the world outside remains cold and wet. Thunder rumbles far off, just enough to make the paper lantern flicker. The samurai pulls his cloak closer, shoulders hunched under the pattering rain. He touches the Jizo amulet tied around his wrist. Protection, they say, for travelers and watchmen who walk through the night. He moves on, passing the temple's wooden gate, bowing once toward the great bronze bell that continues to vibrate in the hush. His footsteps echo down the stone path. The drizzle turns to a gentle rain. Bamboo gutters overflow, dripping onto moss and stone. Up ahead, he knows, lies the old guardhouse, a place to rest for a moment, to share a few soft words with another soul who guards the sleeping city. But for now, he is alone, a single freckled face in a city of dreams, carrying a tiny flame through the darkness. And so, with each step, the samurai sinks deeper into the hush of Edo, the night wrapping around him like a faded kimono, stitched together with shadows and rain. The narrow street winds away from the temple walls, deeper into the sleeping city. Old wooden houses lean over the path, their eaves dripping rain like slow tears onto the stone. The samurai's lantern glows steady in the mist, each footstep soft, each breath calm. As he walks, memories drift in and out like a low mist hugging his ankles. 1,000 nights like this, the same damp cloak, the same hush in the air. The code of the samurai holds him steady. Protect the ward, guard the hush, vanish like a ghost when dawn comes. Up ahead, a faint light flickers behind old shoshi screens, the guardhouse. A simple shelter of wood and bamboo, its roof patched with mismatched tiles. A single oil lamp burns inside, throwing soft shadows across the tatami floor. The samurai slides the door open without a sound. Warm air greets him, carrying the scent of old cedar and faint incense. Inside sits an older watchman, face creased with years, beard flecked with white, a half-smile always waiting at the edge of his mouth. "Kazuo," the old man says, his voice just above a whisper. The samurai bows deeply, his name spoken like a forgotten lullaby. Few in this city know it now. Out here, he is just a blade in the mist. The old guard, Hideo, pours him a cup of barley tea from a small cracked kettle. Steam rises, mingling with the lantern light. Kazuo sits on the edge of the tatami, cloak draped over his shoulders, rain still clinging to his freckled cheeks. For a few quiet minutes, they sip tea together. Outside, the drizzle turns to a steady patter, a comforting drumbeat on the patched roof. They speak softly, words floating between them like drifting lanterns on a river. "Any trouble tonight?" Hideo asks, half knowing the answer. Kazuo shakes his head, eyes heavy-lidded, the warmth of the tea sinking into his bones. Only the temple bell. A stray cat. Hideo chuckles, a sound so gentle it barely ripples the hush. "Even the cats keep you company, eh? Better them than thieves." They share a soft laugh, and for a moment, the heavy silence of the patrol lifts. Hideo pours another cup, hands trembling slightly with age. He's watched these streets for decades, long enough to know the ghosts that linger behind the paper walls. Outside, the wind shifts. A bamboo wind chime rattles under the eaves, singing a thin lullaby. Kazuo leans his head back against the wooden beam, eyelids fluttering. In the flickering oil lamp's glow, the freckles on his face look like tiny specks of ink scattered by a poet's brush. Hideo watches him with grandfatherly patience. "Rest if you need. The rain will hide your footsteps when you go." Kazuo nods, but sleep is not for him, not yet. He has more streets to walk, more shadows to greet. The hush must be guarded until the first roosters cry. He sets the empty tea cup down, bowing again. Before he goes, Hideo hands him a small rice ball wrapped in crinkled paper. "For the road," he says, voice low. A warm belly makes the cold less sharp. Kazuo tucks it into his sleeve, rises, and slides open the door. The night greets him again, cold but gentle. He glances back once. Hideo lifts a hand, a wordless blessing. Lantern raised high, Kazuo steps back into the hush. Raindrops gather on his helmet, drip onto his shoulders, run down the side of his nose where freckles bloom like stars in the dark. The guardhouse fades behind him. Ahead, another street waits, a cluster of old shrines and garden walls, secrets curled up like sleeping cats. He moves on, footsteps barely there, his tiny flame dancing through the mist, keeping the darkness at bay. The drizzle fades to a soft mist as Kazuo steps away from the old guardhouse. The oil lamp's warmth lingers in his hands and chest, and the small rice ball hidden in his sleeve feels like a secret waiting to be unwrapped when the cold bites harder. His sandals scuff lightly over damp stone, the lantern's glow flickering against crooked fences and carved wooden gates. Up ahead, the narrow path widens, opening into a small garden. Courtyard, half hidden behind an ancient wooden gate bound with rusted iron. This shrine is one he knows well, the tiny Inari shrine, where fox spirits watch over rice harvests and restless souls alike. Kazuo bows low at the gate before stepping inside. Moss clings to the stone steps, slippery under his straw sandals. Ferns spill from the cracks in old walls, dew sparkling on every leaf. In the shrine's heart stands a tiny wooden structure, paint faded and fox statues worn smooth by decades of rain. He kneels, resting his lantern on a flat stone. Its glow washes over the shrine, throwing shadows behind the stone foxes. He pulls the rice ball from his sleeve, unwraps it carefully, and places half at the foot of the shrine, an offering for whatever spirits might be watching, for good luck and safe passage through the hush. Above, the clouds part for a heartbeat. A silver slip of moonlight touches the courtyard, making wet leaves shine like polished jade. Kazuo tips his face up, freckles glowing in the gentle light. For a moment, his breath stops. The city's noise, the guard's footsteps, the drip of water, everything fades until there is only the hush of old stone, old wood, and the quiet promise that dawn will always come. He closes his eyes, listening to the tiny sounds. A bamboo drip, the rustle of a night bird settling in the trees, the gentle creak of the shrine's wooden door shifting in the breeze. He presses his palms together, muttering a prayer that's half forgotten, taught to him by his mother long before he carried a blade. When he stands, he feels the ache in his legs, the weight of his armor. But it is a gentle weight, a reminder of duty, of the hush he holds back from the people dreaming behind paper walls. Beyond the shrine, the path twists through low garden walls, lined with gnarled plum trees and tangled ivy. Stone lanterns stand guard at each corner, their bowls empty, but for puddles of rainwater reflecting the soft glow of his lamp. He pauses at each wall, checking the shadows, the spaces where trouble sometimes hides. Drunkards, thieves, or spirits that slip between the gaps when the watchman's eyes close for too long. Tonight, the hush is unbroken. A stray frog croaks once from a pond somewhere beyond the wall, then falls silent. His sandals make no sound now. Only the rain's whisper keeps him company. He runs a hand along the cracked plaster of the garden wall, fingertips brushing moss, feeling centuries of quiet stories baked into the stone. Each garden holds a secret. Behind these walls, someone's mother sleeps. An old merchant dreams of debts forgiven. A young child listens to the rain and wonders if a samurai ever passes by. Kazuo lifts the lantern high. Mist curls around him, catching the warm light. His freckled cheeks glow gold for a moment before the hush pulls the shadows back in. Step by step, the patrol continues. The hush deepens, and the sleeping city dreams on, guarded by a single flame and a freckled face moving like a ghost through the night. The shrine courtyard fades behind Kazuo as he slips through the small wooden gate, careful not to wake the hinges with a careless push. The mist grows thicker now, curling between the narrow alleys like a cat finding warmth in a sleeping house. He lifts his lantern higher. The glow bounces off rain-slick stones, catching glimpses of faded ink signs, wooden shutters pulled tight, and the sleeping shapes of baskets and barrels stacked against the walls. Every corner feels softer now. The hush has wrapped itself around the ward like a thick quilt. Somewhere, hidden behind a cracked fence, a rooster gives a single low crow. Too early yet for dawn, but even the animals feel the hush lift a little, the edge of the night turning pale. Kazuo's footsteps echo softly. He pauses at a fork in the alley. One side bends toward the canal, where old fishermen's huts lean over the dark water. The other slinks behind the bathhouse, steam drifting lazily from hidden vents. He chooses the canal path tonight. The water's hush feels deeper, the wooden docks slippery under his sandals. He stops by the first dock, peering into the black glass of the river. Tiny fish break the surface now and then, their ripples fading quickly into the fog. A faint wooden clatter draws his eyes to a small fishing boat tied to a post. An old man, barely a shadow, pulls his net in, working without a lamp. Their eyes meet for a moment, the two shapes nodding once. No words. Both are men of the hush, one guarding the dreams of the city, the other pulling his living from the slow breath of the river. Kazuo moves on, past the boats, past the sleeping huts, back toward the tangle of alleys where paper lanterns hang cold and dark from the eaves. Above, The rooftops glisten with dew. A thin line of smoke curls from a single chimney. Someone's up early, perhaps a baker stoking the coals for the morning rice buns. The samurai pauses beside an old bathhouse wall, its boards warm and damp. He rests his palm against the wood, feeling the soft heat inside. Families curled under quilts, dreaming of plum wine and summer festivals. He closes his eyes. His freckled cheeks, wet with mist, look almost painted in the lantern's glow. A memory drifts in, his mother's voice, telling him stories about fox spirits that guard wanderers, about how the hush is a blanket the gods pull over the city to keep it safe until sunrise. A small shape scurries by his foot. A rat, perhaps, or maybe the same stray cat, tail flicking, looking for scraps behind the bathhouse. He smiles faintly. In this hush, even the smallest life feels sacred. He adjusts the katana at his hip. The blade stays dry under its lacquered scabbard, untouched tonight, just as he hopes it will be every night. To walk the night without drawing steel is the mark of a watchman truly at peace. He lets out a long breath. The distant rooster crows again, louder this time. The horizon is still dark, but Kazuo knows the hush will break soon. He must finish his rounds before the city wakes. Lantern raised, cloak pulled close, he steps back into the maze of alleys. One last path waits, the final promise to the people he guards, that the hush will hold until the sun takes its place above the sleeping rooftops. Kazuo steps off the dock, the hush of the canal giving way to the hush of the narrow lanes that twist through the old merchant district. His lantern flickers low now, its oil nearly spent, but it glows steady, a stubborn ember against the coming dawn. The drizzle has turned to a mist, so fine it hangs like breath between the rooftops. Each drop clings to his helmet and drips down the side of his face, running over freckles that look almost painted in the pale pre-dawn light. He rounds a bend in the alley and pauses at an old wooden bridge. No wider than 2 men across, it arches gently over a thin stream that cuts through the ward. Beneath it, the water glows faintly with reflections of the paling sky. He sets the lantern down on the bridge's railing for a moment and stretches his shoulders. The weight of his armor feels heavier now, not with fatigue alone, but with the promise of rest just out of reach. His eyes drift shut for a breath, listening to the slow water below, the faint chirp of a bird waking too early in the eaves of a nearby shop. The hush is changing. He feels it. The invisible thread that ties the sleeping city together begins to loosen. Curtains flutter open in distant windows. Paper doors slide back just enough to let in the dawn breeze. Somewhere far off, a wooden pestle knocks against a mortar, someone pounding rice for the first meal. Kazuo lifts his lantern again and crosses the bridge. On the other side, a narrow street runs behind rows of old wooden shops. A candle maker, a weaver, a tiny tea stand that smells faintly of roasted barley. He pauses by the tea stand's paper door, lifting the flap slightly. The old woman inside is already awake, hands deep in a basket of tea leaves. She glances up and smiles, toothless but bright. She mouths a silent thank you to him, a gesture that says she slept well because the hush held. He bows low, returning her silent blessing, then moves on. Each step carries him closer to the edge of the ward, where the city's wall meets the fields beyond. There, the hush thins to a mist that drifts across open paddies and muddy footpaths, a place where the city's dreams fade into the countryside's endless sigh. The lantern's flame trembles in the freshening breeze. He stops beside a weathered Jizo statue tucked into a nook in the wall, the guardian of travelers. Kazuo kneels, bowing his head until his helmet nearly touches the cold stone. He mutters a soft prayer, asking that the hush he's held through the night follows him through the day. A rooster crows again, loud now. The sky behind the rooftops turns the color of pale rice paper brushed with ink. The final promise is kept. The people inside these walls slept safely. The hush has done its work. Kazuo rises, fingers brushing the freckles on his cheeks, as if counting each quiet night they've seen him through. He tucks the near-empty lantern under his arm, the flame barely a spark now. The hush bows to the dawn, and the samurai bows with it. Kazuo's steps grow slower as the hush lifts behind him. The small wooden bridge and its drifting mist fade into memory. Now he walks along the city's edge, a narrow lane that curves beside the outer wall, where stone and timber hold back the rice fields beyond. The hush is thinner here, but no less sacred. Farmers will soon drift in through the eastern gates, carrying bundles of fresh greens, root vegetables, and the first catch from the river. But for now, the fields lie under a soft layer of mist, like a blanket the dawn has yet to pull back. Kazuo pauses by a weathered guard post built where the wall bends. It's little more than a lean-to of old planks and a roof patched with straw, but it has kept watch over this corner for generations. A faded banner flutters from the post's side, its inked emblem barely visible. A reminder that once, even the walls needed swords standing every few paces. He ducks inside, careful not to rattle the bamboo wind chime that hangs under the eaves. Inside, the scent of old cedar and cold ashes greets him. A tiny charcoal brazier sits in the corner, the coals dead, but waiting for the next watchman's spark. He rests his lantern on a low shelf. The flame dances weakly, a final flicker before it dies. Kazuo lowers himself onto a rough wooden bench. He unties the helmet strap under his chin. The weight slips off with a soft thunk. His hair, damp with mist, clings to his forehead, freckles standing out stark against his tired skin. He closes his eyes. For a heartbeat, he could almost sleep, right here beside the cold brazier in the hush that clings to this last corner. But duty pulls him up again. Outside, the sky shifts. Charcoal gray turns to soft brushstrokes of pale peach and misty white. Dawn tiptoes over the thatched roofs, slips between the narrow lanes, and pools in the ruts of the muddy path that leads to the fields. Kazuo steps back out into this fragile light. He rolls his shoulders, testing the stiffness in his back. A passing breeze tugs at the loose strands of hair around his face, the cool air kissing the freckles on his cheeks. For a moment, he stands completely still, watching the horizon as a thin band of gold appears behind the distant rice paddies. The hush gives one final sigh. He knows that behind the city walls, old merchants are waking, mothers are nudging sleepy children toward the morning stove, and someone, somewhere, will look out their window and see only calm. That is enough. The hush has held. The city slept. He turns, adjusting the strap on his half-empty oil flask, lantern tucked under his arm. The guard post door creaks as he closes it gently behind him. In the distance, he hears the first soft clang of a temple bell, the sound rolling over the rooftops, like a promise that night's shadows can never truly stay. Kazuo bows his head to the wall, then to the pale sky. His patrol ends here, a silent vow made at the edge of the waking world. Tomorrow night, he will walk again, tracing the hush through alleys, bridges, gardens, and shrine courtyards, a freckled ghost with a single flame in his hand. And when dawn comes again, he will vanish into the mist, unseen but always there, holding the hush until the sun says it's safe to dream. Kazuo steps away from the old guard post, the rough wood behind him still warm from where his lantern's last glow rested. The air has changed, no longer thick with mist, but crisp and cool, the kind that wakes even the sleepiest soul. The hush that wrapped the city all night begins to slip away, folding itself into narrow shadows beneath the eaves, waiting to return when the sun dips again. Kazuo walks along the edge of the rice paddies now, his sandals wet with dew that clings to the muddy path. Each step feels both heavy and light, the weight of duty balanced by the promise of rest. He pauses to look back at the rooftops rising behind the city walls. Tiny threads of smoke drift lazily from kitchen chimneys, the sign that fires are being stoked, kettles set to boil, rice pots bubbling before the day's labor begins. A child's giggle echoes faintly from the other side of the wall. Maybe they've caught sight of him, a lone samurai, freckled face turned soft in the first light. To them, he's a guardian ghost who disappears when the sun climbs high enough to wake the streets. He smiles to himself, a small, tired curve of his lips. He adjusts his armor strap, feeling the leather creak. His sword stays sheathed at his hip, just as he hoped it would when he left his home hours ago. No blade drawn, no hush broken by steel's cry. Only the warm hush of footfalls on wet stone, the whisper of paper lanterns, the quiet prayers at mossy shrines. As he reaches the last bend in the path, the fields open wide. Rows of young rice shoots glisten under a pale gold sky. The horizon glows, a soft brushstroke of peach, ivory, and the faintest lavender, like the hem of a silk kimono. Kazuo stands there for a moment, soaking in the hush that now feels like a fading dream. He reaches up to touch his freckled cheek, cool with morning mist. He remembers how his mother would stroke those freckles and say they were the stars that guided him through the night, small lights that never went out even when the world turned dark. In the far distance, a farmer steps into the field, hoe balanced across his shoulder. He catches Kazuo's eye and nods, no words needed. Two keepers of the city's rhythm, one for the hush, one for the harvest. The samurai bows low to the rising sun, lantern tucked empty at his side. He knows another watch will come when dusk returns, when the hush rises again to cradle the city's dreams. But for now, his work is done. He will slip back through the side gate, past the old shrine, down the narrow lane, where his home sits quiet and waiting. There, he will wash the mist from his hair, untie his heavy armor, and slide beneath a thin quilt. Outside, the city will wake, the hush will sleep, and so will he. And when the hush calls again, he will answer, freckles and all, lantern in hand, like a promise whispered just before the world falls asleep. Kazuo leaves the open rice fields behind as the path winds back toward the small gate he slipped through hours ago. Each step feels softer now. The hush of the night no longer clings to the rooftops, but it stays close around his shoulders, like a worn cloak he refuses to shed just yet. He passes the old Jizo statue again, bowing low in thanks for another night safely kept. The little stone figure seems to smile in the pale dawn light, moss glittering with dew on its rounded head. Through the small side gate, the city greets him with the first hum of waking life. The slap of water from a bucket, the soft hush of a broom sweeping a courtyard, the faint murmur of prayers spilling from a shrine's open doors. Kazuo's steps are slow, deliberate. He has guarded these streets, these walls, these dreams. Now, in this small hush between duty and sleep, they seem to guard him in return. He slips through an alley he knows by heart. The path twists behind a line of tiny houses where paper doors are just now sliding open to the dawn breeze. A mother leans out, lifting a bucket to her well. She sees Kazuo's silhouette, the armor, the helmet in his arms, the freckles that catch the last glow of the dying lantern. She bows her head, just a heartbeat, just enough to say thank you without words. Kazuo bows back, a ghost drifting between dreams and daylight. His home stands at the end of a narrow lane, an old wooden house with a sloping roof, patched in places with fresh bamboo. The tiny garden by the entrance is damp and shining, plum branches drooping with pearls of water. He slides open the door with a soft creak, careful not to wake the hush that still clings to the threshold. Inside, the scent of tatami mats and cool cedar greets him. He sets the empty lantern on a low shelf by the door, places his helmet on a stand, and lets the katana slide free of his hip. The steel never left its scabbard, a small victory he carries like a charm. He sits for a moment on the wooden step, pulling off his sandals, feeling the cold floor under tired feet. His freckled face turns toward the paper screen that looks out onto the tiny garden, a splash of green and earth where the hush lingers longest. Kazuo lifts a small cup of water to his lips, the cold touch shocking him back from the edge of sleep. He smiles faintly, remembering the warmth of the brazier in the guard post, the hush of shrines and old bridges, the way the hush itself trusted him to keep it safe. He breathes out a single word of thanks to the hush that held him as much as he held it. Slowly he rises, slides back the thin quilt waiting in the corner, and eases himself down. Outside, the hush drifts off, replaced by the sounds of life, roosters, temple bells, the murmur of merchants greeting the sun. Inside, Kazuo sleeps, freckles catching the first light that spills through the paper screens, a promise that when the hush returns, he will rise again, lantern in hand, ready to guard the dreams that float between dusk and dawn. Kazuo lies beneath the thin quilt, its edges tucked gently under his chin. Outside the small house, the world stirs fully awake, but in this quiet corner, the hush holds on just a little longer. His breathing is slow, steady, the rhythm of a man who knows he has done his duty well. The freckles on his cheeks, kissed by the first soft glow of morning, look like tiny constellations mapping every alley, bridge, and shrine he walked through the night. In the tiny garden beyond the paper screens, dew drips from plum blossoms, landing softly on stone. The hush rests there too, in the delicate sway of a bamboo stalk, in the faint echo of his footsteps, fading in the dirt path outside his gate. Kazuo's dreams come slowly, drifting in like the mist that curled around him hours ago. He dreams of the stone bridge over the canal, lantern light dancing on black water. He dreams of the shrine courtyard where he pressed his forehead to cool moss. He dreams of the guard post, the faint warmth of dying coals, the old banner fluttering like a promise. And in every dream, he sees the hush, a pale fox spirit watching over the city's dreams, trailing its tail through alleys and gardens, weaving a blanket of quiet over every restless sleeper. In the dream, the fox sits by his side, brushing its tail across his freckled cheek. He knows it is the hush itself, telling him he is safe, that the city is safe, that the next dusk will come, and he will rise again. A soft clatter in the street, a merchant's cart rumbling by, wooden wheels rattling over stones. A rooster crows once more, but the sound feels far away, as if the hush has cupped it in its paw, gentle and warm. His eyes flicker open for just a heartbeat. He sees the paper screen glow with a brighter patch of gold, the sun fully risen now, painting the garden in sleepy warmth. He smiles faintly, lips curving in a line no blade could ever carve. His lantern, empty of oil, rests on a shelf by the door, ready to be filled again when night calls. His sword lies by his futon, still in its lacquered scabbard, untouched by blood or fear. The greatest mark of a samurai's night well kept. Kazuo lets out a slow breath and sinks deeper under the quilt. He dreams of tomorrow's hush already, the hush he will walk again, lantern swinging softly, footsteps echoing against ancient stones. And above him, the rooftops and courtyards hum with the promise that as long as there is dusk, there will be hush. And as long as there is hush, there will be a watchman to guard it. Lantern light flickers through the painted lattice of the forbidden city's hidden passageways. Beyond the crimson gates, the world sleeps, thousands of chambers, tiled rooftops like ink strokes under the moon. But inside these walls, life never truly rests. Mei Lin moves softly, her feet wrapped in cloth to muffle every step. She is one of the Emperor's night servants, the hush keepers who drift from chamber to chamber, ensuring the palace breathes without waking. Her tiny lamp glows like an ember in a sea of shadows. She ducks through a narrow archway, the silk of her robe whispering against the ancient brick. Her eyes, wide, heavy-lidded, catch every flicker of movement. A paper screen shifting in a draft, a painted fan left open on a lacquered stand. She pauses in a small courtyard tucked deep in the inner court. Bamboo sways above her, their slender leaves shivering in the midnight breeze. A pair of palace cats lounge near a carved stone lion, tails flicking lazily. They too are hush keepers, guardians of soft dreams. Mei Lin kneels by a shallow basin of water. She dips a silk cloth in, wrings it out, and wipes down the polished threshold to the emperor's private study. No dirt must remain. The hush must stay pure. Far off, a distant drumbeat echoes, the palace watch marking another hour in the dark. She bows her head, freckles on her cheeks catching the glow of her lamp. Some say those freckles are good luck, small constellations that guide her through the maze of silk screens and carved corridors. Tonight, the hush is her only companion. Her breath clouds in the cool spring air that drifts through a half-open window. Somewhere in the shadows, a eunuch passes, his own lantern bobbing like a ghost's eye. Mei Lin slips through another doorway. Inside, an old servant snores gently on a rolled-up mat. She bows, placing a folded blanket over his feet before moving on. In every corner of the Forbidden City, someone like Mei Lin moves unseen, smoothing the hush like silk over the sleeping heads of royalty, concubines, and servants alike. When the moon rides highest, she finds a quiet corner by a plum tree in the imperial garden. She sets her lamp down, folds her legs beneath her, and leans against the rough bark. Her eyelids flutter as the hush hums in the bamboo above. Tomorrow, she will wake before the roosters, slip through these same corridors, and the hush will follow her, a secret kept in silk and shadow. Mei Lin rests under the old plum tree just long enough to feel her eyes grow heavy, then lifts herself back to her feet. The hush does not wait too long. It drifts like mist through the covered walkways, curling around the sleeping court. She lifts her lamp, its flame quivering in the soft breeze that snakes through the imperial garden. Here, the hush is deeper. Lanterns flicker in distant pavilions, their warm glow caught in the lacquered wood of carved railings. Shadows pool under the broad leaves of ancient magnolias, blossoms clinging like pale stars. A hidden path runs alongside a koi pond, its water so still it reflects the moon perfectly, like a polished mirror laid on black silk. Mei Lin pauses to watch the fish glide just beneath the surface. Their scales shimmer red and gold, right against the hush. She kneels on the stepping stones, her freckled face hovering just above the water. She breathes in the damp, sweet air. Plum petals drift across the pond, touching her reflection before dissolving into ripples. Somewhere deeper in the garden, the soft clink of a jade wind chime breaks the hush. She knows that sound well. It hangs outside the Dowager Empress's private quarters, a delicate note that marks the edge of where Mei Lin can go. She rises, careful not to brush her lamp too close to the garden's silk banners. In the Forbidden City, even the wind is expected to behave, and a single spark could scatter the hush forever. She moves toward a small stone bridge arching over the pond. Its worn surface has felt the footsteps of countless generations. Concubines slipping secret letters, eunuchs carrying forbidden whispers, loyal guards standing like statues through centuries of night. Mei Lin pauses at the bridge's crest, lantern held close to her chest. Below her, the hush seems to gather in the shadows under the arch. She imagines the stories hidden there, secrets that never reach the sunlit courtyards. She crosses the bridge and ducks into a narrow corridor that runs behind a row of guest chambers. Paper walls slide softly behind her, the hush pressing in like a silk curtain. She passes an open screen and catches a glimpse of an old scholar, his head bent low over a scroll by candlelight. His brush scratches faintly, adding characters to a record that will be locked away before dawn. Mei Lin bows unseen. She wonders if he notices the hush, if he too feels the way it settles like a blanket over the palace when the world forgets to stay awake. Far ahead, a small gate waits, half open, its iron hinges squeaking in the breeze. Beyond it, the hush thickens again, a deeper shadow where secrets dream until morning. She steps through, freckled cheeks aglow in the lamp's flicker, and the garden hush closes behind her like a secret only she knows how to keep. Mei Lin pushes open the small iron gate and slips into the jade hallway, a narrow, winding passage where green-tinted lanterns cast shimmering shadows on the polished stone. The hush here feels alive, drifting in and out of carved dragons and painted phoenixes that line the corridor's beams. Each footstep echoes softly, the cloth binding around her feet muffling her presence. She holds her paper lantern just low enough to keep the flame hidden from the wind that snakes through cracks in the ancient walls. Her freckled cheeks catch the jade glow, giving her the look of a ghost drifting through a centuries-old dream. In this part of the palace, few servants come at night. The jade hallway leads to the scholar's wing, a maze of small libraries, secret archives, and rooms filled with scrolls too precious for daylight chatter. Mei Lin's task is simple. Deliver a small lacquered box of fresh ink stones to the head, scribe's chamber before the rooster crows. She carries the box tucked under her arm, its weight oddly comforting, proof that she belongs in these hidden shadows. Halfway down the hallway, she pauses beside an open lattice window. Outside, a rock garden lies blanketed in moonlight, its sand raked into careful circles that hold the hush like a pond holds rain. A tiny frog croaks once, its voice swallowed immediately by the hush that thickens around Mei Lin's shoulders. She kneels by the window, setting her lamp on the sill for a moment. She presses her fingertips to the cool jade railing, feeling its ancient surface worn smooth by countless night servants like her. A story hidden in the hush. How many feet have stepped here, freckled or not, carrying inkstones and secrets from chamber to chamber? She rises, straightens her robe, and lifts her lamp again. Ahead, a pair of carved stone lions guard the final archway into the scholar's wing. Their wide mouths seem to breathe out the hush, watching Mei Lin with eyes that have never slept. She bows low, her freckles nearly brushing the floor, and steps through the archway. Inside, the scholar's wing is warmer. Paper lanterns hang in pairs, their painted flowers drifting like petals across the silk screens. The air smells of cedar ink and old parchment, a scent that soothes her, even as her eyelids grow heavier. At the far end of the hallway, a wooden door stands ajar. Soft candlelight spills onto the polished floor, trembling with the hush. She hears the scratch of a brush, the shuffle of silk sleeves, the faint whisper of words committed to ink. Mei Lin kneels just outside the door, sets down her lamp and the lacquered box, then bows so low her freckles disappear into the shadows. She does not speak. The hush speaks for her. A figure appears in the doorway, a head scribe, an old man with brows like drifting clouds. He meets her sleepy gaze, then nods once, a silent blessing that drifts into the hush like a plum blossom onto still water. Mei Lin backs away, lamp cradled in her palms. She slips down another narrow corridor, her steps lost in the hush that settles deeper with each breath. The palace is not yet awake. The hush is hers to keep, for a little while longer. Mei Lin moves deeper into the scholar's wing, her soft slippers brushing ancient floorboards that creak just enough to remind her they're alive. The hush here is so thick it clings to the painted screens like morning mist. Beyond the scribe's chamber lies a hidden passage few servants dare to cross at night. It winds around old storehouses stacked with scrolls bound in silk threads, each one a secret history of the emperors who came before. She slips through an arched doorway shaped like a perfect moon, the moon gate. Its smooth stone rim feels cool against her palm as she steadies her lantern's flickering light. On the other side, the hush blooms into a small courtyard, its rock garden raked into spirals, so precise they look like the ripples of a dream dropped in water. A cherry tree stands at the garden's center, its slender branches still clinging to a handful of blossoms despite the night's chill. Petals drift lazily to the gravel, each one a hush folded into pink silk. Mei Lin kneels beneath the tree, resting her lantern on a flat stone. Her freckled cheeks glow in the soft light, her lashes heavy as she lets the hush seep into her bones. She listens for the palace guards, but the distant clack of their wooden clappers fades quickly, devoured by the garden's quiet. She knows what comes next, an errand for the old herbalist who tends to the emperor's sleeping drafts. The hush must be fed herbs, too, lavender bundles, dried lotus petals, roots wrapped in parchment, and tied with gold thread. She rises and slips through a narrow gate at the far end of the courtyard. The stone path curves between thick bamboo that rattles gently in the hush. A pair of stone turtles, cracked by centuries of rain, guard the threshold of the herbalist's hut. Inside, a single oil lamp burns beside a row of wooden shelves, each lined with ceramic jars marked with neat brush strokes. The air hums with the scent of dried flowers and crushed roots. Mei Lin bows deeply to the shadows. The herbalist, a stooped figure with hair tied in a white silk cloth, emerges from behind a bamboo screen. In silence, he places a tiny cloth bundle in her waiting hands, a mix of petals meant to lull the hush into even deeper sleep. She presses her forehead to the floor and thanks, freckles hidden beneath her fringe. When she stands, the hush clings to her robe like an invisible cloak. Outside, the moon gate awaits, and beyond it, more corridors and secret courtyards, each one a pocket of hush waiting for Mei Lin's quiet footsteps. She lifts her lantern, petals bundled safely in her sleeve, and slips back through the moonlit gate, a hush keeper moving like mist between the palace's waking dreams. A bundle of petals tucked safely inside her sleeve, Mei Lin makes her way back through the bamboo grove. The hush rattles lightly with each sway of green stalks brushing her silk robe. She lifts her paper lantern higher, its flame trembling like a tiny heartbeat in the dark. Ahead, the path splits into two. One corridor leads back toward the servant quarters. The other curves into the lantern corridor, a passage known for its rows of hanging paper lanterns that never fully go dark. Mei Lin chooses the lantern corridor. She steps under the first lantern. Painted with cranes and pine trees, its glow a warm blush, it kisses the freckles on her cheeks. The hush here dances in colors, soft pinks, muted golds, pale jade greens. The silk banners overhead sway ever so slightly, casting shadows that move like ghostly dancers. Halfway down the corridor, she pauses before a large bronze urn. It is here she must place the herbal bundle, ready for the emperor's evening tea that ensures he drifts into a dreamless sleep. She kneels, unties the silk cord, and lifts the cloth open. Dried lotus petals, hints of lavender, and a tiny pinch of ground sandalwood fall into the urn's hollow belly. She bows low, hands folded on the cold bronze, a tiny promise that the hush will linger in the emperor's chamber till dawn. As she rises, she notices her reflection in the polished side of the urn, a sleepy young face, soft freckles like constellations caught between worlds. For a heartbeat, she wonders if the hush looks like her, quiet, small, yet everywhere all at once. She gathers her robe and drifts further down the lantern corridor. Servants from the tea house pass her, carrying lacquered trays of porcelain cups, steam swirling around their heads like pale ghosts. They nod to her, acknowledging the hush-keeper's silent work. Past the corridor's final archway lies the Dream Pavilion, a place where concubines sometimes gather to read poems or sip warm jasmine tea under the moon. Tonight, the pavilion sleeps, its low tables empty, cushions fluffed, and waiting for morning. Mei Lin enters the pavilion, slipping her lantern onto a small shelf. She kneels on a soft cushion, folding her legs beneath her, spine straight despite the weariness pulling at her shoulders. She listens. Hush, hush. It echoes through the painted beams and driftwood screens, curling around silk scrolls and low lacquered tables. She closes her eyes for a moment, imagining how the hush slides into the emperor's tea, how it settles in the scrolls, the silken sleeves, the paper walls that hold centuries of whispered secrets. In the Forbidden City, the hush is not just silence. It is a promise, a comfort, a lullaby carried on freckled shoulders and hidden footsteps. Tomorrow, the hush will return, and so will she, with her lamp, her petals, her constellations of freckles mapping the palace's sleeping heart. The hush follows Mei Lin as she leaves the lantern corridor behind. She drifts like a drifting petal through a narrow side door that leads into one of the Forbidden City's oldest gardens, the Lotus Pond Court. By day, this place hums with the quiet chatter of court ladies, the rustle of silk robes brushing stone pathways. But at night, the pond lies still, a black mirror dotted with floating lotus blossoms, their pale petals glowing like scattered moonlight. Mei Lin stops at the edge of the water, setting her small paper lantern on a carved stone pedestal. Its reflection dances on the pond's surface, making the hush seem to breathe in ripples. She kneels on the cold stone, her freckled face leaning close to the water's edge. She can almost see herself, half servant, half hush, freckles drifting like stars over her sleepy eyes. She remembers the stories told by older servants, that the lotus pond keeps secrets, love letters hidden in hollow reeds, betrayals whispered to the lily, wishes dropped into the water, bound in silk ribbons that vanish before dawn. She dips her fingertips into the water, stirring the hush. Tiny koi swim lazily beneath her reflection, golden flashes that remind her the hush is alive, even when the palace sleeps. Behind her, a crumbling stone wall shields the garden from the watchful eyes of guards. Through a gap in the wall, the soft hush of bamboo leaves filters in, mixing with the gentle drip of water from an old bronze spout. She opens the small silk pouch the herbalist gave her. Inside, a final pinch of petals meant for the lotus pond. She scatters them on the surface, watching them drift away, carrying the hush into the pond's quiet heart. For a moment, Mei Lin closes her eyes. She lets the hush wrap around her shoulders like a worn silk shawl. Her breath slows, matching the stillness of the pond. She feels the hush settle in her bones, a promise that the palace will stay wrapped in soft secrets until the sun nudges the horizon awake. A night breeze brushes a stray hair across her freckled cheek. She lifts her lantern again, its glow catching on her sleeve. She stands, her feet cold against the damp stone, but the hush keeps her warm. She steps back from the water's edge, careful not to disturb the lotus blossoms that cradle the hush like fragile dreams. The palace is still waiting, more hidden corridors, more secrets behind painted screens. The hush must move. And so must Mei Lin, her freckles blooming like dusk-lit constellations, guiding her deeper into the Forbidden City's sleeping heart. The hush follows Mei Lin as she leaves the lantern corridor behind. She drifts like a drifting petal through a narrow side door that leads into one of the Forbidden City's oldest gardens, the Lotus Pond Court. By day, this place hums with the quiet chatter of court ladies, the rustle of silk robes brushing stone pathways. But at night, the pond lies still, a black mirror dotted with floating lotus blossoms, their pale petals glowing like scattered moonlight. Mei Lin stops at the edge of the water, setting her small paper lantern on a carved stone pedestal. Its reflection dances on the pond's surface, making the hush seem to breathe in ripples. She kneels on the cold stone, her freckled face leaning close to the water's edge. She can almost see herself, half servant, half hush, freckles drifting like stars over her sleepy eyes. She remembers the stories told by older servants that the lotus pond keeps secrets, love letters hidden in hollow reeds, betrayals whispered to the lily, wishes dropped into the water, bound in silk ribbons that vanish before dawn. She dips her fingertips into the water, stirring the hush. Tiny koi swim lazily beneath her reflection, golden flashes that remind her the hush is alive even when the palace sleeps. Behind her, a crumbling stone wall shields the garden from the watchful eyes of guards. Through a gap in the wall, the soft hush of bamboo leaves filters in, mixing with a gentle drip of water from an old bronze spout. She opens the small silk pouch the herbalist gave her. Inside, a final pinch of petals meant for the lotus pond. She scatters them on the surface, watching them drift away, carrying the hush into the pond's quiet heart. For a moment, Mei Lin closes her eyes. She lets the hush wrap around her shoulders like a worn silk shawl. Her breath slows, matching the stillness of the pond. She feels the hush settle in her bones, a promise that the palace will stay wrapped in soft secrets until the sun nudges the horizon awake. A night breeze brushes a stray hair across her freckled cheek. She lifts her lantern again, its glow catching on her sleeve. She stands, her feet cold against the damp stone, but the hush keeps her warm. She steps back from the water's edge, careful not to disturb the lotus blossoms that cradle the hush like fragile dreams. The palace is still waiting, more hidden corridors, more secrets behind painted screens. The hush must move. And so must Mei Lin, her freckles blooming like dusk-lit constellations, guiding her deeper into the Forbidden City's sleeping heart. Mei Lin walks quietly through the maze of stone courtyards and covered walkways, careful not to let the porcelain bowl slip from her hands. The hush breathes around her like a warm cloud, carrying the scent of rice and the soft rustle of silk slippers on cold stone. She pauses at a tiny arched bridge that crosses a shallow stream. Moonlight dances on the water, and mist coils around the stepping stones like sleepy dragons. Her freckled face glows pale in the lantern's flicker. She glances down at her reflection, sleepy eyes, hair coming loose, freckles blooming like secret stars. She breathes in the hush, letting it seep deeper into her shoulders, steadying her before she steps onto the bridge. On the far side, a narrow path leads to the west gate, the ancient passage guarded through every century, every emperor's reign. Stone lions crouch on either side of the gate, their mouths parted as if they too whisper hushes to the sleeping world. As Mei Lin approaches, she sees the old guard waiting. He sits on a low wooden stool, hunched beneath a small oil lamp that barely keeps the chill at bay. His eyes are half closed, lids heavy with years of half-forgotten dreams and lonely nights. When he notices her, he straightens, offering a gentle nod. He knows her hush well, knows she brings not just warm rice, but a piece of the palace's softest hush, folded like a blanket around tired bones. She kneels before him, setting the porcelain bowl carefully on a small wooden tray. The warm steam unfurls in the cold air, curling around her freckled cheeks. The old guard murmurs a blessing, his voice so soft it sinks into the hush without a trace. "Your hush keeps the walls strong, Mei Lin," he whispers, his cracked lips curling into a sleepy smile. She bows low, her forehead almost touching the stone floor, her freckles disappearing into shadow. She waits, hands folded in her lap, as the guard takes the first spoonful of rice. The warmth spreads into the hush, binding it tighter to the gate's ancient stones. Beyond the gate, the world outside the Forbidden City sleeps under the same hush, rooftops, gardens, and alleyways bathed in moonlight. Mei Lin glances through the half-open gate, imagining the hush drifting into the city streets like a ghostly mist. When the guard finishes, he nods once more, a wordless thank you woven into the hush between them. Mei Lin rises, lifting her paper lantern. The hush clings to her braid, her robe, her freckles, a promise carried back through the corridors, deeper into the palace's sleeping heart. The west gate will hold its secrets until dawn, and so will she. The hush curls tighter around Mei Lin's shoulders as she leaves the west gate behind. Her paper lantern sways gently in her hand, casting flickering shadows on ancient walls brushed with centuries of whispered secrets. She walks slowly through a covered walkway, draped in hanging silk curtains that shiver in the night breeze. Beyond the walkway lies the scroll hall, a chamber so old that even the hush creaks like an ancient floorboard when it settles inside its walls. Mei Lin pushes open the carved wooden door, its hinges sighing like an old servant dozing off. Inside, rows of scrolls sleep on polished bamboo shelves, histories inked in delicate brushstrokes, records of emperors, poems written by ghostly scholars who drifted through the palace long before her freckles were ever born. She sets her lantern down on a low writing table, its glow brushing over the faded scroll covers. She kneels, resting her sleepy freckled cheek on her folded arms for a moment, just breathing in the hush. The scent of old ink and dried rice paper weaves through the shadows. Tonight's task is simple. Check the scrolls that tell the hush how to stay awake, yet asleep. The old scroll keeper, a thin figure wrapped in layers of silk, emerges from behind a painted screen. His eyes are like shuttered windows, yet they warm when they fall on Mei Lin's small, freckled face. He bows silently. She bows deeper, a hush exchanged with a breath. He unrolls a single scroll between them. The parchment crackles softly, revealing a hand-painted scene of moonlit gardens and servants gliding like ghosts between hidden gates. Mei Lin runs her finger lightly along the ink lines, tracing paths she's walked 1,000 times but will never fully know. The hush here is fragile, a paper hush, easily torn by careless hands. She presses her palm flat on the scroll, promising the hush she will carry it safely to the Emperor's chambers when the time is right. Outside the scroll hall's lattice windows, shadows of bamboo sway like sleepy dancers. Crickets whisper their own hush between the leaves. The scroll keeper carefully ties the ancient scroll with silk cord and slips it into a bamboo tube. He hands it to Mei Lin, a weightless promise wrapped in centuries. She bows again, freckles hidden in shadow, then lifts her lantern and the scroll bundle together. As she steps through the door, the hush flows behind her like a silk ribbon tugging at her braid. Each step back through the palace is a stitch in the hush, a silent vow that the Forbidden City's secrets, written or unwritten, will sleep safely until the sun breaks the hush apart, petal by petal. The hush is heavier now, almost drowsy in Mei Lin's arms, as she carries the scroll tube through the winding corridors of the Forbidden City. Her paper lantern flickers, its tiny flame dancing like a heartbeat against the ancient walls brushed in gold and deep red. A palace cat, lean and gray, slips from behind a pillar and curls up beside her. It purrs once, then drifts into its own hush, a ball of warmth pressed against her knee. She pauses at the base of a grand staircase leading up to the Emperor's inner chambers. Wide stone steps rise into shadows beneath sweeping crimson eaves, carved with dragons and cranes, guardians of hush, of sleep, of secrets too delicate to name aloud. Mei Lin kneels on the lowest step, setting her lantern beside her. She unwraps the scroll, smoothing the silk cord with careful fingers. Her freckles glow in the faint lantern light, each one a soft hush of its own. She feels the hush seep from her fingers into the stone steps, the scroll tube, the walls themselves, all holding centuries of sleepy breaths. Slowly, the sky beyond the palace roofline shifts from ink black to soft pearl. A single bird calls from the highest rooftop, a hush breaking like a thin piece of porcelain. Mei Lin stands, tucking the scroll tube beneath her silk sash. She lifts the lantern, its flame dimmer now but steady, and begins her climb up the staircase. Each step feels like she's walking through clouds, soft, slow, weightless. At the top, she passes through a pair of carved doors into the emperor's chamber. Heavy curtains block the first rays of dawn, keeping the hush intact for just a little longer. She bows low before the sleeping emperor's bed, her freckles hidden beneath the sweep of her fringe. She places the scroll tube gently on an ivory table beside a steaming porcelain teacup. The hush of ancient words will wait there until the emperor wakes. When she turns to leave, she pauses for one last glance, the hush coiled around the room like a silk dragon, warm and sleepy. Outside the chamber, the palace begins to stir. Servants shuffle through covered corridors, their slippers whispering secrets back into the hush. Lanterns flicker out, replaced by the soft gray glow of morning light. Mei Lin steps through a side courtyard, where plum blossoms are just beginning to open, pink petals catching the first sunbeams like confetti tossed for the hush's slow departure. She lowers her lantern, breathes in the hush one final time, and lets it rest on her freckled cheeks like a kiss from the past. In the Forbidden City, the hush never truly dies. It drifts from petal to scroll, from secret corridor to moongate, from a sleepy servant's freckles to the heartbeat of an emperor who dreams in silk. And so Mei Lin walks on, hush keeper, dream carrier, disappearing into the hush that will be waiting again when the next night falls. The hush begins far below the temple gates, a winding path of mossy stones that curl through pine forests and mist. It is night, but the mountain seems half awake. Wind rustles the bamboo groves, crickets hum their hush into the valleys, and a pale half-moon rests like a pebble in the sky. A lone novice monk climbs the final steps, his straw sandals scuffing the stone. His name is Sora, young, slender, with hair cropped short and a scattering of freckles across his sleepy cheeks. His faded brown robe is patched at the elbows, and a tiny paper lantern swings from his staff, sending warm hush light onto the trail. At the temple's massive wooden gate, 2 ancient stone lion dogs guard the entrance, their mouths frozen in mid-roar, though the hush of centuries has dulled their warning. Sora bows low to them before slipping inside. Within the temple walls, a large courtyard opens beneath the stars. A single bell tower rises to the left, its iron bell sleeping in silence, waiting for dawn to stir it awake. On the right, rows of wooden monk quarters nestle under sloped tiled roofs. The doors slide open with a hush when needed, but tonight they stay closed, holding in the warmth. Sora pauses at the stone basin, rinsing his hands in freezing mountain spring water. The cold wakes him just enough to carry the hush deeper inside. He breathes out a tiny cloud that curls into the hush, joining the incense drifting from the temple's main hall. Inside, older monks sleep on thin futons laid side by side, heads shaved, brows relaxed, breaths steady as the mountain winds. Some dream of falling cherry blossoms, others of poems they whispered to the hush when they were young like Sora. Sora tiptoes past, careful not to disturb the hush woven through each futon. He carries a small pouch of fresh incense sticks, offerings for the dawn prayer. Above him, paper lanterns sway gently from thick wooden beams. Shadows play on the rice paper walls, brush-painted prayers that have watched over the monks for centuries. He kneels at the foot of the altar, freckles glowing softly in the lantern's hush. He sets the incense pouch down, bowing 3 times until his forehead grazes the tatami mat. Outside, the wind shifts, sending a swirl of bamboo leaves across the courtyard. The hush carries them into the shadows, a promise that the mountain will cradle these sleeping monks until the first bell tolls. Sora rises from the tatami mat, his knees cold where they pressed into the woven straw. He picks up the tiny pouch of incense, tucking it into his robe's wide sleeve. His paper lantern flickers at his side, throwing shadows of pine branches across the temple's wooden walls. He slips quietly through a sliding door that opens onto the outer walkway, narrow planks that wrap around the temple buildings. like a hush that never ends. Beyond the walkway, mist drifts through the courtyard, carrying the scent of pine needles and faint traces of burning sandalwood. Sora's footsteps tap softly, pat, pat, hush, as he makes his way toward the small prayer hall where the novice monks gather before dawn. Inside, a single monk sits cross-legged, so still he could be a statue. His shaved head glistens in the lantern glow, and his eyes open just enough to greet Sora with a nod. Sora bows deeply, his freckles hidden for a moment as his fringe slips over his brow. He sets the pouch of incense before the statue of Kannon, the bodhisattva of compassion, the painted face watching him with half-closed eyes that mirror the hush. Outside the prayer hall's paper screens, the bamboo grove sighs in the wind. Leaves brush against the wooden eaves like tiny whispers, a lullaby only the monks can hear. The older monk begins to chant, low and steady, his voice weaving through the hush like a warm thread. Sora closes his eyes, breathing in the hush and letting the words drift through his sleepy thoughts. In the far corner, a small brazier glows with coals. He reaches for a stick of incense, lights it carefully, and places it upright in a stone bowl of ash. The thin column of smoke rises, twisting and curling, carrying prayers higher than the mountain's peak. As the chanting grows softer, Sora lets his lantern rest on the floor beside him. His hands fold into his sleeves, and his freckles warm in the hush like stars tucked away in the mountain's hidden sky. He knows he must stay awake until the bell calls the monks for dawn meditation, but the hush is heavy tonight. His eyelids dip once, twice, catching in the shadows. Outside, the temple cat pads along the walkway, pausing to watch the flicker of Sora's lantern. It blinks once, curls up beside the prayer hall's door, and sinks into its own hush, guarding the sleeping monks. And so the hush settles deeper, in the smoky spirals of incense, the whispered chants, the soft brush of bamboo leaves against the roof. Inside this mountain temple, the hush will hold its sleepy monks safe until the first rays of dawn slip through the mist and stir them awake. The hush slips from the prayer hall and follows Sora as he rises, bowing low to the chanting monk before stepping back onto the wooden walkway. His paper lantern sways, casting soft circles of light that dance along the corridor walls, polished wood darkened by centuries of temple footsteps. Outside, the bamboo forest shivers as an owl calls once, a single hush note drifting between the trees. Sora's next task is simple: bring warm tea to the oldest monks resting in the back quarters. He crosses a covered bridge that arches over a tiny pond. Moonlight glimmers on the water's surface, catching shadows of fat koi fish drifting just below. His sandals click softly on the planks. Pat, pat, hush. Each step pulls him deeper into the mountain's dream. He pauses at a small stone lantern where moss creeps up the sides like sleepy green fingers. Beyond the bridge, the temple's tiny tea house waits, tucked under a sloping roof and framed by blooming plum trees. A single paper lantern glows inside, its hush mixing with the faint clink of teacups and the gentle bubbling of a kettle over coals. Sora slides open the wooden door and steps into the warmth. The hush wraps around him like an old blanket. An elderly monk named Jiro kneels by the brazier, his back curved like a mountain path, his eyes closed as he listens to the water begin to simmer. He opens them just enough to see Sora's sleepy freckles, then nods once, a hush greeting deeper than words. Sora bows and kneels beside him, carefully lifting a small clay teapot. He holds the handle steady as Jiro sprinkles in fragrant green leaves. Steam rises, carrying the scent of mountain herbs through the tiny tea house. The hush is sweeter here, thick with warmth and the promise of rest. Outside, the wind rattles bamboo chimes, each note a hush that floats through the plum branches. When the tea is ready, Sora pours it into small porcelain cups, each one painted with a single plum blossom. He arranges them on a wooden tray, hands steady despite the hush tugging at his eyelids. He bows once more to Jiro, who smiles softly and closes his eyes again, drifting back into his hush as the tea house glows warm around him. Sora lifts the tray, balancing it carefully, freckles flickering in the lantern's hush. He knows each cup will soothe the monk back into the deepest sleep, carrying prayers through dreams and into the mountain itself. And so, with tea, hush, and the hush's hush, he slips back through the night, ready to cradle the temple's sleeping hearts a little longer. Balancing the wooden tray of steaming teacups, Sora pushes open the tea house's sliding door with his shoulder. Outside, the mountain wind brushes his cheeks, carrying the hush deep into his freckles, the warmth of the tea house clinging to him like a secret blanket. His sandals whisper over the planks of the covered walkway as he slips past the sleeping monk's quarters. Beyond the corridor, a bamboo garden opens like a hidden hush. Tall green stalks swaying gently, their leaves clinking like tiny chimes in the night. A narrow path of smooth stepping stones wends through the grove. Sora pauses at the entrance, shifting the tray to one hand so he can steady the flickering paper lantern tied to his staff. Lantern light catches the mist drifting between the bamboo stalks. For a moment, he feels like he's walking through a dream, every hush deeper than the next. Halfway down the path, he stops at a tiny wooden pavilion with open walls that let the moonlight spill in. Inside, 3 old monks sit cross-legged on straw mats, their eyes closed, their breath soft as the hush that fills the grove. One of them, Master Ren, stirs awake when he hears Sora's footsteps. He lifts his wrinkled eyelids, gaze settling on Sora's freckled face, and smiles. Sora kneels before them, placing the tray gently on the wooden floor. He bows 3 times, forehead brushing the mat, before lifting the first teacup with both hands. He serves each monk in turn, moving slowly so the hush is never broken by clinking porcelain. The steam curls into the cool bamboo air, carrying the scent of fresh green leaves and warm earth. Master Ren takes a small sip, closing his eyes again as if the tea is another prayer to the mountain hush. The other monks follow, each cup warming hands lined with the hush of decades spent in silent meditation. Outside the pavilion, a pair of fireflies drift through the bamboo stalks, tiny lanterns of their own, joining Sora's hush. Once the tea is served, Sora sits back on his heels, hands tucked into his sleeves. He watches the monks sip and drift further into the hush, their heads dipping like blossoms folding at nightfall. The hush in the bamboo garden thickens, weaving around the monk's soft sighs, the rustling leaves, and the faint drip of water from a hidden spring. Sora breathes it in, letting it settle into the freckles on his cheeks, a promise that this hush will hold him long after dawn. When the tea is gone, he collects the empty cups, bows once more, and steps back onto the path, the hush's shadow wrapped around his lantern's glow. Through the bamboo, back toward the sleeping temple, he carries the hush with every step. Sora steps quietly away from the bamboo pavilion, the empty teacups stacked neatly on his tray. His lantern swings at his side, sending a hush glow onto the stone path ahead. Above him, the moon peeks through drifting clouds, silvering the bamboo leaves with soft shimmer. He crosses a narrow wooden bridge that arches over a koi pond. The water is glassy and dark, broken only by the gentle ripple of sleepy fish drifting beneath the surface. He pauses at the center of the bridge, leaning over the wooden railing. The hush deepens here. Frogs croak somewhere in the reeds, their voices low and drowsy like the monks themselves. His freckles glow warm in the lantern light, catching tiny beads of mist that drift up from the water. Beyond the pond, a moon garden spreads like a secret tucked inside the temple's heart. Round stones form a winding path through raked gravel swirls that glisten under the night sky. Clusters of moss, ferns, and small bonsai trees cast tiny shadows on the garden walls. Sora steps off the bridge and follows the hush trail between carefully placed stepping stones. Each footfall lands softer than the last. Pat, hush, pat, so even the crickets barely pause their nighttime lullaby. In the center of the moon garden sits a low stone lantern, its hollow carved with a delicate pattern of lotus petals. Beside him, Corey unties the last of the seed bundles, her hands caked with wet earth. She lifts her gaze, catches his, and they share a sleepy smile, the hush of the fields drifting with them as they climb the narrow path home. At the cottage, the bamboo door swings open with a gentle creak. The hush inside is warm and fragrant. The clay hearth crackles with low flames, a battered pot of rice steaming at its heart. Corey kneels by the hearth, stirring miso broth with spring onions and tiny garden radishes floating like sleepy stars. Haruto slips off his muddy sandals, feet leaving hush footprints on the worn wooden floorboards. A skinny cat curls in a sunbeam near the vegetable baskets, tail flicking as it half dreams of mice and warm rice scraps. Wooden bowls and chopsticks wait neatly on the low table. Haruto lowers himself onto a faded cushion, his knees creaking louder than the bamboo door. Corey places a steaming bowl in front of him, perfectly cooked rice, the grains soft and sticky, carrying the hush of morning water with them. She pours warm barley tea into a tiny clay cup, its rim chipped from years of use. They eat slowly, no rush, just the hush of chopsticks tapping bowls, the distant murmur of frogs drifting up from the terraces, and the warm scent of miso filling every corner of the cottage. Through the open window, Haruto watches the breeze ripple the young rice shoots. Each blade bends in the hush wind like a prayer, a promise that this life, simple, quiet, and freckled with morning mist, is enough. After the last bite, Haruto leans back against the wooden wall, eyelids drooping. Corey smiles, gathers the empty bowls, and hums an old lullaby that drifts into the hush like steam from the rice pot. Outside, the cat stretches, rolls onto its side, and the hush of the cottage settles again, warm, green, and endless. The warm hush of lunch drifts into the hush of early afternoon. Haruto sits cross-legged on the old veranda that wraps around the cottage, his back resting against a sun-warmed wooden pillar. Corey hums softly inside, washing the empty bowls in a shallow clay basin. The hush of trickling water blends with the lazy hum of dragonflies, weaving slow circles above the vegetable patch. Haruto's straw hat slips down over his eyes. He lets his head tilt back, freckles hidden beneath the hat's frayed brim. His breath slows, matching the hush of the wind that drifts across the flooded paddies. The rice fields shimmer, a patchwork of glassy steps, each one holding the sky like a bowl of drifting dreams. A bamboo chime dangles from the cottage eaves. Each hush gust of wind sets it swaying, wooden tubes knocking together in a sleepy melody. Below the veranda, the skinny cat stretches in a patch of shade, paws flexing in its own hushed dream. Beyond the fence, a small flock of sparrows pecks at stray grains that have escaped the seed bundles. Haruto drifts further into the hush, his back sinking into the warm pillar, hat pulled low, mouth softly open. He dreams of the fields, tiny rice shoots whispering secrets in the hush mud, frogs croaking lullabies, and water trickling in soft silver threads from terrace to terrace. Corey steps out onto the veranda. She pauses, smiling at the sight of her husband sleeping like an old stone in the sun. She spreads a thin cotton cloth over his shoulders, a hush blanket against the shifting breeze. The hush deepens, bamboo chime, sparrow wings, the cat's tail flicking in a lazy half-circle. Time slows, folding into itself like young rice leaves curling toward the sky. When Haruto stirs again, the sun will have dipped lower. But for now, the hush holds him, freckles warm, sandals lined neatly by the veranda step, and the promise of rice waiting in the paddies below. A warm breeze brushes across Haruto's cheek, stirring him from his nap. The hush of the bamboo chime still dances in the air above the veranda, carrying the sleepy promise of the afternoon. He lifts the straw hat, blinking at the golden glow slanting across the flooded paddies. His freckles catch the light, scattered like tiny seeds across his sun-touched skin. Corey steps onto the veranda, a cup of cool barley tea in her hands. She offers it with a soft smile. No words, just the hush of shared afternoons when the world feels small and kind. The tea slides down his throat, chasing away the last threads of sleep. Beyond the vegetable patch, the bamboo fence leans tiredly, its posts weathered from rain and wind. Haruto stands, stretching his back with a quiet groan. The hush shifts as he gathers fresh bamboo poles and twine from the small storage shed tucked behind the cottage. The skinny cat follows him halfway, tail flicking, but soon curls up in the soft dirt near the cucumber vines, returning to its own hushed dreams. Down by the fence, Haruto works slowly, no rush. His breath slows, matching the hush of the wind that drifts across the flooded paddies. The rice fields shimmer, a patchwork of glassy steps, each one holding the sky like a bowl of drifting dreams. A bamboo chime dangles from the cottage eaves. Each hush gust of wind sets it swaying, wooden tubes knocking together in a sleepy melody. Below the veranda, the skinny cat stretches in a patch of shade, paws flexing in its own hushed dream. Beyond the fence, a small flock of sparrows pecks at stray grains that have escaped the seed bundles. Haruto drifts further into the hush, his back sinking into the warm pillar, hat pulled low, mouth softly open. He dreams of the fields, tiny rice shoots whispering secrets in the hush mud, frogs croaking lullabies, and water trickling in soft silver threads from terrace to terrace. Corey steps out onto the veranda. She pauses, smiling at the sight of her husband sleeping like an old stone in the sun. She spreads a thin cotton cloth over his shoulders, a hush blanket against the shifting breeze. The hush deepens, bamboo chime, sparrow wings, the cat's tail flicking in a lazy half-circle. Time slows, folding into itself like young rice leaves curling toward the sky. When Haruto stirs again, the sun will have dipped lower. But for now, the hush holds him, freckles warm, sandals lying neatly by the veranda step, and the promise of rice waiting in the paddies below. A warm breeze brushes across Haruto's cheek, stirring him from his nap. The hush of the bamboo chime still dances in the air above the veranda, carrying the sleepy promise of the afternoon. He lifts the straw hat, blinking at the golden glow slanting across the flooded paddies. His freckles catch the light, scattered like tiny seeds across his sun-touched skin. Corey steps onto the veranda, a cup of cool barley tea in her hands. She offers it with a soft smile. No words, just the hush of shared afternoons when the world feels small and kind. The tea slides down his throat, chasing away the last threads of sleep. Beyond the vegetable patch, the bamboo fence leans tiredly, its posts weathered from rain and wind. Haruto stands, stretching his back with a quiet groan. The hush shifts as he gathers fresh bamboo poles and twine from the small storage shed tucked behind the cottage. The skinny cat follows him halfway, tail flicking, but soon curls up in the soft dirt near the cucumber vines, returning to its own hushed dreams. Down by the fence, Haruto works slowly, no rush. Each post is lifted and reset in the damp earth. Twine wraps around the bamboo slats, his fingers moving in practiced loops, freckles dappled with tiny beads of sweat. A pair of swallows flits overhead, dipping low to snatch insects skimming the water's surface. Their wings cut playful hush ripples across the terraces. Corey appears again, carrying a small basket of garden herbs. She kneels nearby, pulling stray weeds and humming an old melody that drifts through the hush like the breeze through rice shoots. Haruto pauses to watch her, the twine dangling from his fingertips. In that moment, The hush feels deeper than the muddy water, a soft heartbeat between them and the fields that have fed them all their lives. He ties off the last knot, pats the fresh post with his palm, and leans against the fence to catch his breath. All around him, the hush holds steady. Birdsong, soft wind, dragonflies, the low trickle of water from terrace to terrace. He closes his eyes, feeling the hush settle in his chest, carrying the promise that this cottage and these fields will always be a part of him. Freckles, straw hat, bamboo fence, and all. As the sun dips lower, its golden hush spills over the terraced paddies, turning each step of water into liquid fire. Haruto leans against the newly mended bamboo fence, a slow smile tugging at the corner of his freckled cheek. The hush wind rustles the fresh green rice shoots, their tips swaying like sleepy dancers, bowing to the sun. From the narrow footpath winding down the hill, familiar voices drift toward the cottage. It's Taro and his wife, old neighbors who live farther down the terraces, baskets of freshly picked greens balanced on their shoulders. "Haruto," Taro calls, his voice warm but hushed by the distance. Haruto lifts a hand in greeting, his straw hat tipped back to reveal freckles touched pink by the fading light. Cori steps outside, wiping her hands on her apron. She bows to Taro's wife, and the four stand by the fence, exchanging soft words about the weather, the frogs, the hush that makes rice shoots grow strong. Taro sets down his basket, pulling out a handful of fat, green onions, a small gift for the evening meal. In return, Cori offers a bundle of herbs tied with twine, their fragrance weaving into the hush like a whispered lullaby. As they talk, the sky shifts, pale gold melting into soft lavender, then deeper into the first indigo strokes of dusk. A lone heron glides low over the terraces, its wings carving hush ripples across the mirrored paddies. Brr. From inside the cottage, steam curls from the open window, the kettle beginning its low song above the clay hearth. The skinny cat stretches awake, weaving between the neighbor's legs before darting off to chase a drifting leaf. Laughter bubbles up, gentle, sleepy laughter that fades into the hush of frogs calling each other in the gathering dusk. When the neighbors turn to leave, Cori waves until their figures disappear down the winding path, baskets swaying. Haruto watches the hush swallow their footprints, then turns back to the cottage, where the warm scent of rice and steaming tea wait to carry the hush into the night. Darkness folds gently over the rice terraces, turning the water in each paddy into pools of inky hush reflecting the new stars above. Inside the wooden cottage, a single paper lantern glows, its warm hush light spilling over the old wooden beams and rice paper walls. Haruto sits cross-legged on the floor, freckles glowing like little stars themselves beneath the flickering lantern. Beside him, Cori stirs the clay hearth, adding a small log that crackles as the fire takes hold. The skinny cat curls up near the hearth, nose tucked under its tail, dreaming hush dreams of garden mice and warm rice scraps. On a low table, an old bamboo scroll box rests, its edges worn smooth by decades of gentle hands. Haruto unties the faded string, lifting out a bundle of family scrolls, delicate rice paper, painted with scenes of ancestors tending the same terraces long before him. Cori leans close, her freckled cheek brushing his shoulder as they unroll one scroll at a time. There are paintings of tiny cottages perched on the hillside, farmers with wide straw hats planting rice in hush dawns just like theirs. They pause at a scroll showing a festival from many seasons ago. Paper lanterns floating down the terraces like fireflies, a hush trail of light guiding old footsteps home. Haruto's voice is low and steady as he tells the stories his father told him. Stories of storms survived, bountiful harvests celebrated, and hush blessings whispered to the rice paddies every spring. Cori hums softly in agreement, her hand resting on his, freckles pressed against freckles in the hush firelight. Outside, The bamboo chime stirs in the night wind, a sleepy lullaby carried through the window with the scent of damp earth and fresh shoots. The hush wraps itself around them. Old stories, warm fire, freckled faces close together under the soft glow of the paper lantern. As the flames sink lower, the scrolls are rolled back into their box, tied with care, and set beside the hearth. The hush remains, thick with dreams of rice shoots, muddy footprints, and the slow promise of tomorrow's dawn. Outside the warm hush of the cottage, clouds gather like old blankets, pulling darkness close around the flooded rice paddies. The stars slip behind the drifting mist, leaving the terraces bathed in a hush silver glow. Haruto leans near the small bamboo window, propping it open just a crack. The first soft drops of rain tap against the wooden eaves, each one adding to the hush rhythm that fills the night. Corey joins him, her shawl draped loosely over her shoulders, freckles softly shadowed in the lantern's glow. Together they listen. No words, just the hush lullaby of rain trickling from terrace to terrace. The skinny cat lifts its head, ears twitching at the drip-drop song, before it settles back into its curled hush dream near the hearth's faint embers. Beyond the cottage, the bamboo fence Haruto mended stands firm in the rain, sheltering the vegetable patch and the young rice shoots now drinking deeply under the starless hush. Haruto closes his eyes, feeling the cool breeze through the window brush his cheeks, damp with the hush of a lifetime's work, each drop a promise of tomorrow's green. Corey rests her head on his shoulder, her voice barely above the hush of the falling rain. "It will be a good harvest," she whispers, as if the earth itself might be listening. They share a sleepy smile, freckles touching freckles, the hush rain weaving through their silence like an old friend. The paper lantern flickers once, twice, then holds steady, its soft light keeping the night warm even as the drizzle grows steadier. Outside, the terraces glisten under the hush drizzle, mirrors in the darkness cradling the promise of tomorrow's dawn. Inside, the hush deepens, old wood creaks, the bamboo chime knocks softly in the wind, and the sleeping cat sighs as if it too dreams of rain-fed fields. In this hush, there is no need for words. Only the slow hush drip, the warmth of two freckled faces pressed close together, and the quiet heartbeat of the earth drinking in the night. The hush rain continues, steady and soft, turning the rice terraces into a silver quilt stitched with ripples and tiny streams. Inside the cottage, the paper lantern burns low, its glow barely holding back the hush shadows dancing along the old wooden walls. Haruto shifts by the window, listening to the rain's steady song. A faint drip-drip echoes from beyond the bamboo fence, the sound of a tiny breach in the terrace banks where the water trickles too quickly. He slips on his old sandals, pulls his straw hat low to keep the hush drizzle off his freckled face. Corey, half asleep by the hearth, watches him with sleepy eyes and a hush nod of trust. She knows he'll return soon, and the hush rain will not catch him unprepared. Outside, the world is dark but soft, moonless, yet the rice paddies catch every glimmer from the scattered lanterns in distant cottages. Haruto wades through the slit mud paths, his feet finding every stone from memory. The hush rain drips from his hat brim onto his shoulders, running down into his shirt. Each drop carries the memory of 100 such nights, a lifetime of tending tiny leaks, protecting each green blade from washing away. He reaches the breach, a small trickle where the earthen bank has worn thin. He kneels in the hush mud, pressing handfuls of fresh clay into the gap, patting it firm with weathered palms. The hush rain patters on the straw hat, mingling with the sound of frogs croaking from hidden corners. A sleepy firefly drifts past, its faint glow flickering like a tiny hush lantern in the reeds. Once the leak is mended, Haruto stands to survey the terraces, each step holding steady pools of water, reflections of the soft bamboo fences and sleeping rice shoots. For a moment, he breathes in the hush air, sweet with wet earth, old wood, and the promise that the fields will greet dawn safely. When he returns to the cottage, his footprints trail soft hush ripples behind him. Corey is waiting, a dry cloth in her hands, a cup of warm barley tea ready by the low table. He shrugs off his damp shirt, freckles shining in the hush lamplight, and sinks down by the hearth once more, the hush rain singing them back into their warm hush dreams. The hush rain fades just before dawn, leaving behind a world rinsed clean and shimmering in the first pale light. Inside the small wooden cottage, the paper lantern flickers out, its job done for the night. Haruto sits near the window, the straw hat now resting on a peg, hair damp but drying in the hush breeze drifting through bamboo slats. Corey stirs the coals in the hearth, freckles warm in the newborn glow of morning. A clay pot bubbles softly, rice porridge for the new day, steam carrying the hush scent of comfort through the wooden beams. Outside, the terraces glisten like glass steps descending into the mist. Each flooded patty reflects the first blush of sunrise, soft peach, pale gold, and gentle lavender swirling in the hush waters. Haruto steps out onto the veranda, bare feet touching the cool wooden planks. He breathes in the hush, the earth damp and rich, the shoots standing taller after the night's gentle drink. The skinny cat appears, stretching its legs, yawning wide enough to show tiny teeth before trotting off to chase a drifting leaf along the fence line. Corey joins him, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Together they stand in the hush, watching tiny threads of mist rise from the patties like spirits returning to the sky. A pair of swallows swoops low, greeting the hushed dawn with quick darts and playful chirps. Far below, on another terrace, a neighbor lifts his hand in a silent wave. No need for words when the hush speaks louder. Back inside, the porridge waits, warm bowls that will fill them for the day's work ahead. But for now, they linger on the veranda, freckles glowing in the hush light, hearts beating steady with the rhythm of the fields. Haruto closes his eyes, listening to the hush frogs croak their sleepy lullabies back into the muddy banks. Corey rests her head on his shoulder, their shared warmth stronger than the dawn's chill. In this hush, the farmer's cottage and the rice fields belong to the rising sun, to the earth below, to the freckled faces that have tended them for generations. The hush promises this, that every seed planted, every droplet of rain, every sleepy smile shared at dawn will echo in the paddies long after footprints fade. In the quiet hush of Edo's grand castle, while samurai guards drowsed at their posts, a heavy wooden gate hidden behind an ivy-clad wall creaked open. The moonlight fell in silver stripes across its ancient iron hinges, a path that only the shogun himself dared tread when the city slept. Inside, the garden lay wrapped in hush shadows, a secret world of stone lanterns, stepping stones glistening with dew, and koi drifting lazily beneath a layer of drifting cherry petals. Lord Hideyori, the shogun, stepped through the gate, his silk robes whispering against the gravel path. A single oil lantern swung gently from his hand, its warm hush glow brushing the leaves of the dwarf pines and the bamboo grove that fenced his hidden realm from curious eyes. He was no longer the all-powerful ruler with 100 scrolls to sign and courtiers bowing low. Here, among the hush shadows and ancient moss, he was just a boy in his father's old garden, freckled from summers once spent tending tiny bonsai with his mother. Yes, even a shogun may carry childhood freckles in this hushed tale. A soft breeze stirred the wind chimes hanging from a crooked plum tree, filling the night with a hush melody that no ear but his would hear. As he walked, he paused to dip his fingers into the koi pond. Fat golden and white shapes shimmered beneath the moon's reflection, nosing up to meet him like old companions. He carried secrets here, words never spoken in the council halls or whispered in the palace chambers. This midnight garden held scrolls buried beneath stepping stones, tiny shrines hidden behind rock lanterns, and stories carried only by the hush rustle of bamboo leaves overhead. A hush owl hooted in the distance, echoing through the ancient trees. The shogun closed his eyes, letting the hush garden cradle him. Each stone, each mossy path, each drifting cherry petal, a promise that here, under the hush moon, he was simply Hideyori. The garden sighed with him, a hush breath that carried old secrets and new dreams into the still midnight air. Beyond the koi pond, a narrow stone path winds deeper into the garden's hush. Each step Haruto no, Lord Hideyori, the shogun takes is careful, as if the earth itself might wake from an ancient sleep if disturbed too roughly. Above him, the bamboo grove sways gently in the night breeze. Their tall stalks creak and sigh, bamboo leaves brushing each other in whispers that sound almost like voices repeating old secrets. Hideyori stops by a small stone lantern, its warm hush glow flickering over a patch of damp moss. He kneels, silk robes pooling around his legs, the hem dampening from the earth's cool breath. Under the lantern's base, a single loose stone hides a hollow space, an old hiding place he carved out when he was barely more than a curious boy chasing fireflies while the palace slept. He lifts the stone with careful fingers, revealing a small scroll wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from years of rain and hush mist. Unrolling the scroll, his freckled hands trace the faded ink. It is no war decree or trade charter. Instead, it is a poem one his mother wrote long ago, describing this very garden under a hush moon just like tonight. The bamboo hums, the koi listen, the moon watches, and I am at peace. He mouths the words, barely more than a hush exhale into the hush grove. The wind answers back with a sigh through the leaves, as if the bamboo remembers her too. Somewhere deeper in the grove, a wooden wind chime clinks softly. No guard, no servant, no prying eyes. Only the hush, the bamboo, and the memories hidden in the roots of each old stalk. Hideyori rolls the scroll again, pressing it to his chest. In this secret hush garden, his burdens fall away. Here he is not the shogun who must be strong for all, but the son who still listens for his mother's voice in the hush wind. The moon filters through the rustling stalks, scattering hush silver dots on his face freckles like tiny constellations under the night's gentle gaze. When he finally stands, he does not return the scroll to its hiding place. Instead, he tucks it inside his robes. Some secrets deserve to be carried closer to the heart. With a final hush bow to the bamboo grove, he steps deeper into the shadows toward the stone bridge where the garden's oldest secret sleeps beneath the lily pond. Lord Hideyori walks slowly, the scroll hidden deep inside his robes, pressing warm against his heart. His sandals make no sound on the hush garden path, only the soft sigh of gravel underfoot. Past the bamboo grove, the garden opens to a small pond blanketed with lily pads, their round hush leaves crowned with pale blooms that glow like tiny moons themselves. An old stone bridge arches over the pond, its worn stones slick with hush moss and years of misty rain. Hideyori pauses in the hush center of the bridge. Below, fat koi drift lazily between the lily, scales glinting gold and red beneath the hush moonlight filtering through the leaves overhead. He rests his hand on the cool stone railing, feeling the hush vibrations of water trickling beneath. Beneath this pond, if the old stories are true, lies the garden's oldest secret, a small iron chest buried beneath the silt, a box said to hold his grandfather's final letter to his son, his father, written the night the garden was first planted. He has never seen the chest, but as a boy he'd spent hush nights leaning over the edge, lantern light dancing on the water, hoping for a glimpse. Tonight, the hush feels deeper. The moon sits lower, the bamboo leans closer, as if waiting for him to remember where to look. He lowers himself carefully to the bridge's edge, robes trailing in the hush dew. His freckled reflection shimmers on the pond's surface, a ripple of past and present blending together. With slow, steady breaths, He lets his fingers slip into the cool water. The koi glide past, brushing his skin like old friends, stirring the hush silt at the pond's bottom. In the faint swirl of moonlit mud, he glimpses it, the corner of something not stone, not lily root, but a tiny corner of rusted iron. A hush thrill runs through him. The letter, if it survives, might hold words that could change the stories the palace tells, stories that live only in scrolls, buried beneath hush water and hush time. He withdraws his hand, water dripping from his fingertips onto the hush lily. This is not the night to disturb old spirits fully. Not yet. The garden demands patience. A hush waiting. Rising, he bows low to the pond, the koi, the stone bridge. He will come back when the hush feels right, when the garden gives its blessing. The hush wind stirs, rustling bamboo leaves and carrying the faint scent of plum blossoms, even though it's long past their bloom. On the stone bridge, the shogun stands alone under the hush moon, a ruler who kneels to lily pads and listens for secrets older than any throne. Lord Hideyori rises from the mossy stone bridge, droplets from the hush pond still clinging to his fingertips like the night's secret promises. He steps carefully onto the winding path that circles the pond. Moonlight follows him, slipping through tall bamboo stalks and casting hush shadows that seem to shift when he isn't looking. Past the bridge lies the garden's oldest plum grove, trees gnarled and twisted from decades of hush winds, their trunks wrapped in soft moss, like old monks in meditation. Hideyori pauses at the grove's edge. His mother used to tell him this was the garden's soul, that in its branches lived every whisper and hush secret his family ever kept. Tonight, a faint hush fragrance drifts through the grove, the scent of plum blossoms, though the trees should be bare this time of year. In the hush moonlight, he sees them, a few delicate blooms clinging stubbornly to one old branch, petals pale as breath against the hush darkness. He reaches out, running his freckled fingers along the branch's smooth bark. The hush petals brush his skin, soft, fragile, carrying memories of all the winter nights he spent here chasing whispers of his mother's lullabies. A soft wind stirs the hush grove. The tiny blossoms tremble, one drifting down to land on the scroll hidden inside his robe. He holds the petal gently between thumb and forefinger, studying its hush veins. Does the garden bloom out of season because it wants him to remember, or because it has secrets of its own to share? He sits cross-legged on a flat stone beneath the oldest tree. The hush grove wraps him like an old blanket, the rustling bamboo, the distant splash of koi, the hush tap of plum petals falling like snow. In this moment, he is no shogun, only a son, a dreamer, a keeper of stories too fragile for palace walls. He closes his eyes and lets the hush carry him back to when he was a boy, running barefoot through the damp grass, his freckled nose pressed to the same blossoms, hoping they'd whisper back his mother's secrets. Tonight, they do, but only in hush sighs and drifting petals that promise tomorrow's garden will still hold him close, no matter how many scrolls he must sign when dawn comes. Lord Hideyori opens his eyes slowly, plum petals still drifting in his lap like tiny hush prayers. He stands, dusts the soft moss from his silk robes, and slips the stray petal into his scroll, another secret pressed tight against old words. Past the plum grove, half hidden behind a bamboo thicket, lies the garden's oldest shrine, so small it could be mistaken for a mossy stone lantern at first glance. No samurai guards know about this hush corner. No palace records mark its place. It is the shogun's alone, a place where the hush garden spirit lives when the world grows too loud. He parts the bamboo gently with his freckled hand. Moonlight slips through, revealing the tiny shrine built of weathered stone, its roof crowned with creeping ivy. A wooden prayer plaque dangles from the eaves, its edges worn smooth by decades of hush rain. Hideyori kneels before the shrine, forehead nearly touching the hush earth. He lights a single stick of incense. its thin trail of hush smoke rising to mingle with the moonlight and the rustling bamboo above. The scent of sandalwood fills the hush air, blending with plum and damp moss. He whispers a prayer, not for power, not for victory in war, but for hush peace that clings to the garden even when he must leave its embrace. He thinks of the iron chest buried beneath the koi pond, the scroll hidden in his robe, and the blossoms that bloom when they should not. Each is a hush secret, and the shrine is their keeper. A hush owl calls once, then falls silent. The bamboo creaks, old stalks leaning close, as if to listen. For a moment, Hideyori feels her there, his mother's hush presence, a hush warmth brushing the back of his neck like a blessing. He does not turn. He does not speak. Some hush spirits need only the rustle of leaves and the scent of sandalwood to say what words never could. When the incense burns down to ash, he bows low once more. He leaves behind no offerings, but his freckled fingerprints on the cold stone, marks that say, "I was here, I remember, and I will return." Lord Hideyori stands slowly from the hush stone shrine, the last tendril of incense smoke fading into the hush bamboo shadows. He turns toward the path that winds back to the lily pond, his freckled face calm in the hush moonlight, but his pulse hums like the hush wind through the trees. Back at the stone bridge, the pond lies still as glass. Koi drift just beneath the hush surface, flashes of gold, white, and orange beneath the floating lily pads, crowned with soft midnight blossoms. Hideyori kneels at the bridge's edge once more. Tonight feels right. The hush garden seems to breathe with him, as if the moon, the koi, and the whispering plum grove have all agreed. It is time. He slips his silk sleeves up past his elbows and slides his hands into the cool hush water. Silt swirls around his fingers as he feels for the small iron chest, the same shape he glimpsed in the hush swirl nights before. A hush ripple runs across the pond as his fingertips brush rusted metal. He inhales sharply, the hush air tasting of lily and old secrets. With slow, careful movements, he lifts the chest just above the hush waterline. It is heavier than he remembers from childhood dreams, its hinges eaten with hush rust, a small iron lock still clinging stubbornly. Moonlight dances on the iron lid, catching flecks of old paint, his grandfather's clan crest, almost lost to time and hush reigns. He sets the chest on the hush stone bridge, water dripping onto the moss below. His freckled hands trace the lock. There is no key, but keys are for palaces, not for hush gardens. He pulls a small hairpin from his topknot, something his mother gave him when he was barely old enough to tie his own hair for the hush festival. He slips the pin into the rusted lock, feeling for the tiny hush clicks deep inside. A soft clack. The lock yields. He lifts the lid slowly. Inside, hush scrolls rest like sleeping dreams. The old rice paper yellowed, the ink faded, but alive in the hush glow of the moon. The top scroll bears a single hush character, remembrance. He unrolls it halfway, eyes moving over lines his grandfather wrote before the garden was ever planted. Words for a son, for a grandson, for every hush keeper of this garden. In hush earth, we plant truth. Beneath hush water, we hide burden. Within hush hearts, we guard remembrance. Hideyori bows his head over the scroll. The hush garden holds many secrets, but none heavier than the burden to remember. He rolls the scroll again and tucks it deep inside his robe, near his mother's poem and the plum blossom petal. A hush promise. The garden's stories will not fade while its freckles and bones still walk its paths. He closes the chest gently and lowers it back beneath the hush pond. Some burdens must sleep underwater, where koi can guard them better than men. Standing, he lets the hush wind dry the droplets on his arms, the moon's hush glow tracing the constellations across his freckled cheeks. The hush garden remains, and so does he. Lord Hideyori stands still on the mossy stone bridge, watching ripples smooth out where the iron chest settled once more beneath the lily pond's hush waters. Above him, bamboo stalks sway gently, their leaves whispering with the hushed promise of dawn. The hush garden has kept his grandfather's letter safe for decades. Now, the hush words sleep closer to Hideyori's heartbeat than any sword ever could. A hush breeze carries the faintest scent of plum and sandalwood incense, memories of his mother's lullabies and old shrine prayers lingering like breath in the hush air. He turns from the bridge and follows the winding hush path through the garden one final time tonight, his silk robes brushing against dew-laced grass, freckled cheeks tingling in the hush chill. At the edge of the garden, a small clearing opens, where the hush bamboo parts, just enough for the sky to greet him. The moon is fading now, a hush ghost dipping behind the first hush blush of sunrise. The stars blink out slowly, giving their place to a pale glow that kisses the hush pond and the ancient plum grove in soft gold. Hideyori kneels in the hush clearing, resting his scrolls, the petal, and his hands gently in his lap. He closes his eyes, listening. Somewhere in the hush distance, a hush rooster crows. The palace beyond the walls will soon stir. Samurai armor will clink in cold corridors, and the weight of a shogun's crown will settle on his shoulders once more. But here, in this hush clearing, the hush garden holds him, not as a ruler, but as a son, a grandson, a hush whisperer who knows that no power outlasts the secrets rooted in hush earth. A single hush leaf drifts from a bamboo stalk overhead, landing softly on his robe. He smiles, freckles bright in the new hush light. He feels them all here, ancestors, mother, grandfather, voices folded inside the hush garden like roots buried deep, ready to bloom each time the wind remembers their names. When he stands, the sun's hush rays break through the bamboo canopy, catching on the dew like tiny hush lanterns. Hideyori bows low to the hush garden, a promise that its stories will live so long as his heartbeat does. He steps forward, scrolls hidden close, the hush path winding back toward the waking palace. Behind him, the hush pond lies still. Koi drift beneath lily that sway gently, petals catching the hush dawn. The iron chest sleeps, guarded by roots and hush memories, older than any throne. And above all, the hush garden watches, forever listening. Lord Hideyori stands in the bamboo clearing a moment longer, letting the hush dawn seep into his bones. He touches the scroll pressed to his chest, his grandfather's hush words, his mother's hush petal, secrets too soft for palace chambers, but too true to forget. He turns down the winding hush path, his sandals brushing aside fallen plum blossoms and damp bamboo leaves. The hush garden fades behind him, koi pond, stone bridge, plum grove, hidden shrine, each corner now folded into his soul like pages in an old hush storybook. Ahead, the hush gate appears, a low wooden arch marking the threshold where garden whispers end and the palace's sharp echo begins. Two young samurai stand at attention there, faces still sleepy, armor glinting dull in the hush dawn. They bow low as the shogun approaches, eyes flickering to the old silk scroll in his freckled hands, but never daring to ask. As he steps through the gate, Hideyori feels the garden sigh behind him, hush leaves rustling, koi splashing once, as if to remind him, the hush stays with you. The palace courtyard is waking. Servants sweep cold stones clean of hush night's fallen petals. Advisors huddle in corners, scrolls and ink, ready for orders that shape kingdoms, but never know the garden's hush. Inside, golden screens and lacquered panels gleam in the dawn light, all polished, rigid, echoing footsteps instead of hush winds. Hideyori walks slowly down the main corridor. His freckled face is calm, but behind his eyes the hush bamboo rustles, the koi pond ripples, and a rusted iron chest whispers. Power lives here, but truth roots itself where lily bloom. An old minister appears, bowing so low his beard sweeps the hushed stone floor. "My lord, the court awaits your word," he murmurs. Hideori nods, slipping the hush scroll into the inner pocket of his silk robe, where no eyes can read, but his heartbeat can remember. He walks on, past tapestries of battles won and scrolls of tribute received, all so loud, so bright, yet none as alive as a hush petal pressed between yellowed rice paper. In his private chamber, he sits alone for a moment before the day's first meeting. He closes his eyes, and in the hush dark behind his lids, he sees the koi pond ripple, the plum blossom drift, the shrine's incense curl into the hushed dawn. Even here, within walls that crave thunder and command, the hush remains, soft, rooted, patient. Lord Hideori sits cross-legged on a silk cushion, alone in the hushed quiet of his private chamber. Outside the paper screens, the palace breathes in shallow gasps, servants' slippers tapping, scrolls rustling, armor clinking in far corridors. He runs a freckled thumb across the hush scroll tucked safe inside his robe. The hush garden's mossy stones, koi pond, iron chest, all hidden now beneath the hush layers of silk and the weight of the shogunate crown. But hush truths do not stay buried, not when they grow deep roots. He rises and moves toward the wide window that overlooks the hush courtyard. Cherry trees stand bare this time of year, their hush branches tangled against the dawn sky. He watches young retainers sweep the old stone paths, each brushstroke an echo of the hush bamboo that bends but does not break. A hush memory drifts to him, his grandfather kneeling by the koi pond, telling a small boy with freckled cheeks, "When the garden speaks, you listen. And when the garden is silent, you listen harder." A soft knock at the screen door. An old minister enters, bowing low, parchment scrolls trembling in his bony hands. "Lord Hideori," he says, voice quivering. "The War Council requests your word. New taxes must be raised, more fields claimed. The people's burden grows heavy." Hideori turns, the hush garden alive behind his calm eyes. He thinks of the iron chest, the words "In hush earth, we plant truth." He thinks of plum blossoms blooming out of season. "Tell them," he says softly, "we shall plant more than we take. Restore the old rice terraces, let the peasants keep their seed grain. If the garden can bloom out of season, so can the people." The minister stares, unsure how to write hush whispers into royal decrees. Hideori steps closer, his freckled face serene in the hushed dawn. "True power," he whispers, "grows like koi beneath lily, unseen but strong enough to move the hush pond." The minister bows again and shuffles away, his mind buzzing with hush instructions he may never understand. Alone again, Hideori feels the hush garden stir within him. Plum petals drift behind his eyes. Bamboo rustles in his veins. The koi circle deeper, carrying iron chests full of hush burdens no throne will ever see. Through the window, the courtyard fills with first light. A hush rooster crows, not loud, but enough to wake old stones from their hush sleep. Hideori smiles, his freckles warmed by the hush sunrise. Some secrets break walls not with thunder, but with roots and ripples and hush, promises that bloom when the world least expects. Lord Hideori stands in the hushed dawn, his reflection caught faintly in the polished wooden floor of his private chamber. Scrolls of new decrees lie open beside him, plans to restore fields, lift burdens, and sow hush seeds where suffering once took root. But the hush garden does not stay behind palace walls. He walks back to the courtyard, past bowing samurai and ministers still blinking sleep from their eyes. The hush wind follows him, carrying the scent of plum petals, koi pond water, and old incense smoke. In the hush garden, the koi stir beneath lilies as if they feel him coming. Bamboo groves lean closer, hush leaves brushing each other like ancestors whispering promises that roots remember. Hideori kneels beside the pond once more, dipping his freckled fingers into the hush water. Ripples spread out, circles of hush that reach the stone bridge, the shrine hidden beyond the plum grove, and the very hush soil where his grandfather's iron chest still sleeps. He closes his eyes and sees it all. The child who once chased koi across stepping stones, the mother who taught him hush prayers, the iron lock that gave way to a hairpin, and a hush memory. Every burden carried in silence, every secret rooted deeper than any crown's reach. He bows low, hush forehead brushing soft moss. His whisper is only for the hush garden to hear. Bloom where we fear to plant. Breathe where the world forgets. Speak where the hush never breaks. When he stands again, a single plum blossom drifts down, landing on his freckled shoulder, a hush sign that ancestors watch, and the hush promises will travel far beyond koi ponds and bamboo groves. Back at the palace gate, young retainers stand ready. They do not know the hush words or the iron chest, but they see a shogun with dawn's hush glow on his calm face, a leader whose hush roots run deeper than gold screens and lacquered thrones. As he crosses the courtyard stones, the hush garden breathes behind him, always there, always whispering, ready to bloom when the world forgets how to listen. And so the hush garden lives, not just in stone shrines and koi ponds, but in every seed planted for those who come next. A hush story that does not end, but blossoms again and again, wherever hush hearts remember. Kneels before it, setting the tray down for a moment. He takes a stick of incense from his sleeve, one saved from the tea house. He lights the incense from the tiny flame inside the lantern's hollow, then presses the base into the damp earth beside a moss-covered rock. A thin ribbon of smoke curls upward, drifting into the hush above the garden walls. The hush here feels ancient, like the mountain's breath. It settles into his skin, his hair, the soft freckles along his nose and cheeks. He closes his eyes for a heartbeat, listening to the hush of the koi pond, the crickets, and the distant bamboo chimes. For a moment, he drifts halfway between waking and dreaming, held in the hush that watches over every sleeping monk. When he opens his eyes, the moon is higher, pale and round, casting light that makes the garden stones glow like tiny moons themselves. Sora lifts the tray once more, bows to the stone lantern, and turns back toward the covered corridor that will carry him deeper into the temple's hush. Step by step, the hush follows, a blanket of mist and dreams. Leaving the moon garden behind, Sora steps back onto the covered walkway, his sandals brushing against polished planks that glow faintly in the lantern's hush. The hush feels different here, thicker, older. The air carries the faint scent of cedar shells and ink, a promise that this part of the temple guards words instead of dreams. Ahead, a pair of wooden sliding doors wait, engraved with tiny lotus flowers curling around the edges. Sora balances the empty tray on his hip and slides one door open with a gentle hush of paper on wood. Inside is the scroll room, a sacred place where the temple's oldest teachings sleep like monks in their own hush. Rows upon rows of cedar shelves rise to the ceiling, each shelf stacked neatly with scrolls bound in soft silken ties. A single paper lantern flickers from a heavy iron hook in the ceiling, its warm glow painting soft shadows that dance across the ancient characters inked onto yellowed parchment. Sora kneels just inside the door, resting the tray at his side. His freckles catch the hush light, a sprinkle of tiny stars against his sleepy face. Tonight, he's here to check that each scroll is safe and dry, a ritual passed down from novice to novice for centuries. He reaches for the lowest shelf, fingers brushing the smooth silk ties. Each scroll hums a quiet story beneath his fingertips, the hush of poetry, prayers, chants, and old tales of monks who walked these halls long before his freckles were born. In the far corner, a tiny wooden writing desk sits beneath the flickering lantern. On its surface rests a half-finished brush painting, delicate bamboo leaves drifting across a parchment sheet. Beside the brush, a tiny inkstone still holds a trace of black ink, shining wet under the hush glow. Sora lifts one of the older scrolls with both hands, careful not to disturb the fragile paper. He cradles it in his lap, bows his head, and closes his eyes, breathing in the hush of ink, cedar, and the soft crinkle of parchment. For a moment, the hush of the scroll room weaves through his thoughts like a dream. He imagines the monks who wrote these characters by moonlight, their brushes scratching secrets onto silk. Words carry on the hush wind that slips through the bamboo walls. Outside, the bamboo garden sighs as the wind shifts. Shadows play on the paper windows, dancing like old monks returning for one last hush. Satisfied that the scrolls are safe, Sora bows low, places the ancient roll back on its shelf, and gathers his empty tray. As he slides the door closed behind him, the hush follows, carrying stories written centuries ago, ready to drift back into the dreams of the sleeping monks. Tray now empty, Sora slips through another wooden corridor, his paper lantern swaying softly at his side. His freckles glow warm in the hush light, eyes half closed as he listens to the distant wind weaving through the temple eaves. Tonight, his final task waits at the highest point, the old bell tower perched above the sloping roofs, guarding the hush from the mountain's peak. He passes a mossy stone stairway, each step older than his grandparents' grandparents. Tiny wildflowers bloom along the edges, nodding sleepy heads as the hush drifts by. At the top, the bell tower rises like an ancient hush drum, its wooden beams dark and polished by countless seasons of rain and wind. Inside, the bronze bell hangs from thick ropes, its surface carved with swirling lotus petals, tiny bodhisattvas, and sleeping dragons that wrap around its curve. Sora slips inside the tower, placing his lantern at the base of the bell. He kneels before it, hands folded into his sleeves, freckles bathed in the hush that settles thick as mountain mist. This bell is not rung for alarm or chaos. It rings for dawn. Its deep voice calls the monks from sleep into the hush of meditation, prayer, and the slow waking of the temple's heart. He rises, palms the thick wooden beam used to strike the bell, and runs his thumb on the old rope bindings. The hush here feels alive, coiled around the bell's metal curves like a waiting echo. With a deep breath, Sora leans back and swings the beam forward. Gong! The sound rolls through the hush, rich and warm, sliding down the stone steps and drifting into the bamboo groves. Below, the sleeping monks stir, their dreams curling around the bell's echo like silk threads. Sora swings the beam again. Gong! The hush folds into the sound, carrying it out past the temple gates, down the misty mountain paths, through pine forests and sleepy villages beyond. He feels the hush vibrate in his chest, the deep bronze voice pressing gently against his freckles, warming him from the inside. As the bell's hush drifts on, the first hint of dawn creeps over the distant ridges, a pale line of light that peaks between drifting clouds. Sora bows low to the bell, collects his lantern, and slips down the stone stairs as the hush lingers in the air behind him. By the time he reaches the temple walkway, the hush of night has begun to shift, turning into the hush of dawn, a promise of prayers and sleepy monks finding their way to another day. With the bell's hush still echoing in his chest, Sora follows the covered walkway down toward the temple's small kitchen. Here, the hush changes. It hums with warmth, steam, and the gentle clatter of wooden ladles stirring morning porridge. He slides open the kitchen door, greeted by a soft wave of fragrant air, rice cooking in huge clay pots, fresh herbs from the mountain garden laid out in neat bundles. A handful of older monks shuffle quietly among the low wooden tables, sleeves tucked high, heads bowed over bowls of sliced vegetables. Their chatter is soft, just a hush above the steam that drifts up to cloud the paper windows. Sora sets down his empty tray near the corner, then bows deeply to the cook, an elderly monk named Master Haru, whose round face and sparse white eyebrows seem to smile even when he's not speaking. Master Haru glances at Sora's freckles, nods, and gestures to a small pile of fresh mountain mushrooms waiting to be sliced. Sora tucks up his sleeves, fingers brushing the soft skin of the mushrooms. His knife moves slowly, hush, hush, each slice falling onto the wooden board like a whisper. Beside him, a huge kettle of barley tea bubbles gently over glowing coals. The hush of the kitchen blends with the dawn's hush outside, warm, comforting, like a blanket spread over the sleepy temple. Through an open window, Sora glimpses the first rays of sunlight brushing the mossy courtyard. Tiny birds hop along the stone path, pecking at stray grains of rice that older monks scatter for them every morning. One novice monk enters, arms full of green onions freshly pulled from the garden. Another carries a basket of steaming buns, their scent curling through the hush like a prayer for hungry bellies. Sora smiles as he works, freckles glowing with the warmth of the kitchen fire. He feels the hush swirl around him. In the steam, the soft thud of his knife, the quiet footsteps of monks moving between pots and bamboo baskets. When the rice is ready, Master Haru lifts the heavy lid, and a cloud of fragrant steam spills out, filling every corner of the small room. The monks pause, hands still, eyes half closed, breathing in the hush together. For a moment, the kitchen is more than just a place to cook. It is the hush made warm and real, feeding every sleepy soul who drifts through this mountain temple. Sora bows once more, sets his knife aside, and carries a steaming wooden bowl of rice toward the dining hall, ready to share the hush with monks, waking to another day of gentle dreams. Bowl of steaming rice balanced in his hands, Sora pads softly down the corridor that opens into the main dining hall, the heart of morning hush. He pauses for a moment under the lintel, blinking as the first shafts of mountain sunlight slip through the high wooden windows. The light catches the floating dust, turning it into tiny golden specks that dance around his freckles like sleepy stars. Inside, long, low wooden tables run from wall to wall, each lined with simple straw mats. Monks sit cross-legged in neat rows, their robes a patchwork of muted colors, brown, deep blue, pale gray. They move slowly, some heads still bowed in half-sleep prayers, their hush breaths mixing with the faint clatter of bowls and wooden spoons. Sora bows 3 times at the threshold, then steps into the hush. He finds his place at the very end of one table, the novice's spot closest to the kitchen door. He kneels, tucks his sleeves up just so, and sets the warm rice bowl in front of him. All around him, the hush feels different now. Not night's hush, but the hush of dawn slipping through old cedar beams, whispering stories of every morning that has come before. Master Haru shuffles down the rows, ladling thin miso soup into each waiting bowl. Steam curls upward, mingling with the sunlight, weaving hush threads through the monks' bowed heads. Sora glances across the table. An older monk with a round face and sleepy eyes raises his spoon, then pauses, meeting Sora's gaze. He nods once, a tiny hush blessing that settles into Sora's freckles like warm rice. The first taste is always slow. The rice is soft, the miso salty sweet, the mountain mushrooms carrying a hint of pine from the forest where they were picked. Outside, birds call from the temple eaves, their hush songs weaving with the low murmur of monks, giving thanks for this simple meal. A young novice beside Sora lets out a tiny sigh of contentment, the hush vibrating from his chest to the floorboards beneath. As Sora eats, he listens to the hush all around him, the quiet scrape of spoons on bowls, the low shuffle of robes, the soft hush of mountain wind pressing against the paper walls. When the last grain of rice is gone, Sora places his spoon across the empty bowl, bows low to the table, and feels the hush of the meal wrap around him like another blanket. In this hush, He knows the day will carry its soft promise, that sleepy monks, steaming rice, bamboo chimes, and freckled novices will forever drift together under the hush of the mountain. The hush of the breakfast hall slowly gives way to the hush of the temple's prayer hall, where dawn truly settles into the bones of this mountain sanctuary. Bowl cleaned, sleeves dusted, Sora shuffles softly with the other novices toward the prayer hall doors. His sandals brush the polished planks, each step wrapped in the warmth of rice still blooming in his belly. Outside the prayer hall, he sets his sandals neatly beside the row of others, then pushes open the heavy wooden door just wide enough to slip through. Inside, the hush grows deep, thicker than steam, older than the stones beneath his feet. Paper lanterns swing from the high beams, their flickering flames caught in glass bowls that keep the wind from chasing them out. The monks kneel in rows on straw mats, their backs straight, hands folded, eyes lowered in sleepy hush. Sora finds his spot at the far end, always closest to the door, where novices learn the hush by watching, not leading. At the front, Master Ren sits cross-legged on a raised platform, the same gentle smile carved into the lines of his cheeks. His eyes drift open, catching Sora's freckles in the lantern's glow. He nods once, a hush welcome. A single deep tone from a small bronze gong breaks the stillness. The monks' voices rise together, low, soft, a hush wave that rolls across the straw mats and slips through the cracks in the old wooden walls. They chant the old words, prayers for peace, for warmth, for hush that settles like snow on the mountainside. Sora lets the hush carry him, eyes half closed, freckles warm with each breath, words tumbling through him like drifting mist. Outside the paper windows, the dawn light grows brighter, spilling pale gold across the stone courtyard. Bamboo chimes dance on the morning wind, their tiny hush song weaving into the chanting hush. A tiny bird lands on the window frame, tilts its head, listening to the hush that fills every crack and fold of the ancient hall. When the final chant fades, the hush remains, a living thing pressed gently against every sleeping soul still tucked in the temple's corners. Master Ren lifts his eyes, bowing low. The monks follow, heads touching straw mats, the hush gathering like mist at their fingertips. As Sora lifts his head, he feels the hush cling to him. Freckled skin warmed by lantern light, eyes still half dreaming. This hush, he knows, will drift beyond the temple gates, down the mossy stairs, through the bamboo groves, across mountain paths, a hush that never ends, whispered from one sleepy monk to the next, forever. Far from the busy village road, where the wind weaves through bamboo groves, an old farmer's cottage sits quietly at the edge of terraced rice fields. As the sky blushes with the first pale pinks of dawn, the hush of night lifts slowly, like mist rolling away from the hills. Inside the small wooden cottage, a farmer named Haruto stirs on his thin straw mat. His cheeks freckled from years under the sun, a sleepy hush in his eyes that mirrors the hush of the fields outside. He sits up, pulling on a faded linen shirt, its sleeves patched and mended by careful hands. He slips his feet into worn straw sandals and steps onto the creaking wooden veranda that runs along the cottage's front. The world is still, the hush broken only by frogs, singing in muddy paddies, and the distant cry of a crane drifting above the terraces. Haruto breathes deeply, the scent of wet earth and new rice filling his lungs. His gaze drifts over the tiers of flooded fields that stair-step down the hillside, each one reflecting the soft dawn like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Beside the cottage, a rickety bamboo fence holds back a small vegetable patch. A skinny cat weaves through the fence posts, tail flicking, hush steps barely stirring the dewdrops clinging to cabbage leaves. Inside, his wife, Cori, stokes the small clay hearth. Steam rises from a battered iron pot where she boils barley tea. The hush of the cottage is warm and alive. Wooden beams creak softly, The old paper windows breathe with the morning breeze, and the smell of rice and fresh onions drifts out onto the veranda. Haruto's freckles glow warm in the dawn light as he stands barefoot on the step, watching the hush settle into the fields below. For a moment, he closes his eyes, listening to the slow trickle of water from one terrace to the next, a lullaby that has rocked farmers to sleep for generations. A new day is beginning, but in this hush, time feels as soft as mist. The cottage waits, the rice waits, and the hush of the dawn wraps itself around the farmer's freckled face like an old friend. After sipping his warm barley tea, Haruto slips on his wide straw hat, its edges frayed from years beneath sun and rain. The hush of the cottage drifts behind him as he steps barefoot into the muddy paddies. His feet sink into the cool mud with a quiet squelch, each step a soft promise between him and the earth. A bamboo yoke rests across his shoulders, balancing two wooden buckets, sloshing with fresh water drawn from the hillside spring. The morning hush blends with the gentle trickle of water slipping down the terraces. A lullaby passed from rice shoot to rice shoot. Dragonflies hover low, their tiny wings catching the dawn light like shards of glass. A pair of frogs leap from one muddy ridge to the next, tiny splashes rippling through the mirrored fields. Haruto stops at the edge of a young paddy, kneeling with care to check each rice plant. His freckled face leans close, eyes half closed, as if he's listening to the hush of roots drinking deep. A distant rooster calls from the village below. Its crow floats up the hillside, lost among the terraced hush. Behind him, Cory appears with a small cloth bundle tied at her waist, seed rice wrapped in soft linen. She kneels beside Haruto, sleeves rolled to her elbows, freckles like his sprinkled across her cheeks. Together, they sprinkle the seeds into the wading water, their fingers trailing gentle wakes through the mirrored surface. The hush deepens, a soft, sleepy conversation between hands, mud, and green shoots reaching for the sky. They pause to watch a heron stalk across the far paddies, its long legs sending lazy ripples down the flooded steps. In this hush, there is no rush. The water moves slowly, like old dreams drifting from one terrace to the next, carrying the promise of another harvest. When the last seeds settle, Haruto leans back on his heels, hat tipped low. He breathes in the scent of the paddies, wet soil, tiny flowers on the embankments, the hush of water trickling just below the chatter of dragonflies. Above the terraces, the sun climbs higher, brushing the cottage roof with golden light. The hush remains, soft, green, and endless. By midday, the sun rides high above the paddies, turning the flooded fields into a patchwork of glittering mirrors. The hush of morning work fades into the hush of weary limbs and empty bellies. Haruto stands at the edge of the fields, wiping sweat from his brow with a faded cloth. His freckles glisten under the bright light, straw hat tilted back, eyes tracing the winding path that leads up to the cottage, perched just above the terraces. Thanks for drifting through this story with me. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always soothing to imagine we're all falling asleep under the same stars. Like and subscribe if this brought you peace tonight. I'll be back soon with another quiet legend from the edges of time. Sleep well, and let the myths keep whispering.